There is a thing Americans do on summer evenings, and we do it without ever deciding to. The sun starts going down, and we stop. A man watering his lawn in Arizona shuts off the hose and just stands there. A family on a dock in Michigan goes quiet in the middle of a sentence. Drivers on a highway in California flip down their visors and catch themselves staring anyway. Nobody taught us this. Nobody had to. Something very old in us watches the sun touch the horizon and pays attention. The way you pay attention when someone you love walks out the door. Here is a question you have probably never asked out loud. Where does it go? You know the science. Sure, but your body has never once believed the science. Your body believes what people have believed since before there were words for it. That the light leaves, that the dark is real, and that somewhere out beyond the edge of the world, the sun is in trouble. 3,000 years ago, on the banks of the Nile, an entire civilization believed exactly that. Every single evening, the people of ancient Egypt watched their greatest god sink behind the western desert, and they did not tell themselves a comforting story about rotation and orbit. They told themselves the truth as they understood it. The sun was going down into the land of the dead. There was a serpent waiting for him there, and if he lost, even once, there would be no morning. Tonight, you and I are going down with him. Stay with me now, because I want you to feel the size of what those people lived with. Picture the Nile Valley at sunset. Any evening, a century. Take your pick from 30 of them. The river runs gold for a few minutes. The way rivers do. Farmers walk up out of the fields with the day's dust still on them. In the villages, doors are pulled shut, and fires are lit, and mothers count their children, the way mothers have always counted their children at dark. And on the western horizon, the sun swells, and reddens, and touches the rim of the desert, and slides down out of the world. And here is the part that separates them from us. When we watch a sunset, we feel something we can't name, and then we go inside and forget it. When they watched a sunset, they knew exactly what they were feeling, because their oldest stories had given it a name and a shape and an address. The sun was not setting. The sun was dying. The god they called Ra, the first king, the maker of everything with a name, was ending his day the way he ended every day, by growing old in front of the whole country. He rose in the morning as a child. He burned at noon as a king in his full strength, and by evening he was an old man, stooped and slow, sinking toward a door in the western mountains that no living person could follow him through. Beyond that door was the Duat, the world under the world, the place the dead go, and the Egyptians, who measured and mapped everything they loved, measured and mapped that place too. They divided the night into 12 hours, and they said, the sun god sails through them one by one, in a boat, through a country of gates and guardians and things without names, all night long, every night, forever, 12 hours. Hold on to that number a second, because it is sitting next to your bed right now. Look at your clock tonight, the one on your nightstand, the one on your phone. Midnight to noon is 12 hours. Noon to midnight is 12 more. Almost nobody knows where that number came from. And the answer is that it came from this story. The Egyptians split the night into 12 parts so they could track their god through the dark, hour by hour, gate by gate. And the whole world has been counting time their way ever since. Every clock in America is quietly keeping score in a 3,000-year-old prayer. When you wake at 3 in the morning and glance at the time, you are reading a map of the Duat. You are checking on Ra. You just never knew it. And the map mattered, because the journey was not safe. That is the whole reason this story exists. Somewhere down there, in the deep middle of the night, in the 7th hour, something is waiting for him. I am not going to show it to you yet. The Egyptians themselves did not like to draw it whole. and when they wrote its name, they stabbed the hieroglyph with little knives, which is the only time in history a civilization attacked its own handwriting. It is enough for now that you know what they knew. The road through the night has a toll, and the toll collector is old. Older than the road, maybe older than the light. So every evening was a departure, and every morning was a victory. When the sun came up over the eastern desert, it was not a fact of nature. It was news. It meant the boat had come through one more time. The gates had opened. The thing in the seventh hour had lost again, and the world had been paid for in full for one more day. The sun has died every single night since the beginning of the world, and every morning. So far, it has won. So far. Keep those two words somewhere safe tonight. By the end of this story, you will know why they were the most important words in Egypt. Now, the boat is at the western door, and the light is almost gone. And here is what I am offering you. The Egyptians believed that when Ra sails through the world below, his light wakes everything it touches. The dead sit up in their sleep for the 1 hour he passes. Old things stir, and memory most of all, rises up shining in the dark like a field at sunrise. Tonight, that is how we are going to hear his story. The whole story. The entire life of the sun, from the very first dawn to the fight that never ends. Not as a lecture, as a night crossing. We are going to board the boat with him at sunset, and we are going to sail through all 12 hours. And at every gate, another piece of his long life is going to wake up in the water around us and tell itself, you do not have to stay awake for all of it. That is the beauty of this particular story. The boat sails whether you watch or not. It has made this crossing every night since the first night, and it has never once needed our help. The sun is touching the desert now. The river has gone the color of hammered copper, and the doors of the west are swinging open, and down at the waterline, in the last of the light, something golden is waiting for us. Come aboard. The gates are opening. Step down onto the deck quietly. Everyone does. Their first time. The boat is longer than you expected. And stranger. The Egyptians called the night boat Mesektet, and they built its picture into 1,000 tombs. So we know it well. A high curved prow that lifts like a reed bending backward. A high curved stern to match. A deck of cedar. A single great steering oar at the back. And in the middle of the deck, a shrine. A small golden cabin with its curtains drawn, glowing faintly from inside like a lantern, with one candle left. The crew is already at their stations, and I want to introduce you to only 3 of them tonight, because a boat full of names is no way to begin a night crossing. There will be time for the others. Near the prow stands a tall figure with quiet eyes, and his name is Sia. Sia is perception itself, the power of seeing what is really there. And his whole job is to look into the dark ahead of the boat and understand it before it arrives. Beside him stands Heka, and Heka is magic, the raw power of the spoken word. The reason Egyptians believed that saying a thing correctly could make it true. Sia sees the danger. Heka speaks at it. That is the oldest partnership on the river. Sight and speech. And the boat does not move an oar's length without them. And at the very front of the prow, apart from the others, there is a third figure. And I am not going to tell you his name. He stands alone at the forward rail with a long spear in his hand, feet planted wide, watching the black water the way a soldier watches a tree line. The rest of the crew gives him room. If you knew the old stories of Egypt, really knew them, his silhouette alone would shock you, because he is the last god anyone would expect to find protecting this boat. He has done terrible things in other stories, on other nights, and yet here he stands, at the point of the spear, every single night, and no one else is trusted with that post. Remember him. When we reach the 7th hour, you will find out who he is, and why the sun needs him. Of all gods, standing exactly there. Now come amidships, past the rowers, to the shrine with the drawn curtains. Come meet the god this whole night belongs to. The curtains part, and there, on a plain wooden throne, sits an old man. I want you to see him the way the Egyptians described him, because they were not vague about it. They said his flesh was gold, not golden like a suntan, gold like the metal, the one bright substance that never rots and never rusts and never dims. They said his bones were silver. They said his hair was true lapis lazuli, that deep blue stone flecked with points of light, so that even his old man's hair was a piece of the night sky with stars in it. Gold skin, silver bones, blue stone hair. The Egyptians looked at their god of light and described a treasure, because a treasure is a thing that time cannot touch. And then, being the most honest storytellers in the ancient world, they told the other half. The gold flesh sags, the silver bones ache, the blue head trembles, just slightly, like a reed in a current. His eyes are deep and slow, and at the corner of his mouth, they said it plainly, and so will I. The old god drools, a thin line of silver, because his body, at the end of each day, is the body of a very old man, and it does not obey him the way it used to. This is Ra at sunset. This is the most powerful being that Egyptian imagination ever produced. The god who lit the first morning, the king who ruled the whole earth when the earth was new, and he sits in that shrine tonight worn down to the bone, because that is the price of his particular job. Every mortal thing ages under the sun. The Egyptians' great secret, the one this entire night is built on, was that the sun ages too. He is born at dawn as a child. He dies at dusk as an old man. And in between lies everything. And I mean everything. The whole history of the world. Lived once per day. Forever. Look at him a moment longer. Because there is one more thing. And it is the thread I want you to hold all the way down through the dark tonight. Somewhere inside that failing golden chest. The old god is guarding something. Not the sun disk. Not the crown. Something smaller and heavier than either. Anum. His true name. The secret one. The name that is not Ra, and not any of the titles carved on any temple wall. The name he was never given, because there was no one alive to give it. The name he spoke over himself at the beginning of everything. In Egypt. A true name was not a label. It was a handle. Whoever holds your true name holds you. And so the sun god keeps his locked in his own chest, where no god and no mortal can reach it. And he has kept it there since before the first morning. I will tell you now, so you can watch for it through the whole night ahead. He does not still hold it alone. There was a bite, and a bargain, and a goddess more patient than pain itself. And the name moved. It is the strangest story anyone ever told about him. And it is waiting for us, down in the deep hours, near the gate where the serpent waits. When we reach it, you will understand why an old man with the power to burn worlds sits with one hand resting over his own heart. The last light is off the water now. Feel that. The boat has begun to move. No sail. No wind. And yet we are gliding forward, out of the evening and into the first hour of the night, because this boat does not sail on water exactly. It sails on the night itself, and the night knows the way. One more thing before the first gate, because you should know what you are standing on. This boat is not a metaphor. In the year 1954, an archaeologist named Kamal el-Malak was clearing rubble at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. and under a row of limestone blocks weighing many tons each, he found a sealed pit, and in the pit, taken apart piece by piece like the world's oldest model kit, lay a full-sized ship, cedar planks, rope, oars, cabin, all of it, over 140 feet long, buried beside the pharaoh Khufu almost 4,600 years ago. It had been sealed in the dark so carefully that when they lifted the planks out, the wood still smelled of cedar. The Egyptians built the king a real boat, a boat that may never once have touched the river, and they buried it next to the largest building on earth for one reason, so that he could sail with Ra. Tourists stand in front of that ship today, in a museum, in Giza, staring up at the actual hull of the belief you are riding on right now. They meant it. That is the thing to carry down into the dark with you. Of all the peoples who ever watched the sun go down and worried, the Egyptians are the ones who built the lifeboat ahead of us now. Rising out of the black water is the first gate. It is as tall as a cliff and older than the desert, and it is already opening, because the gates know this boat, and as the doors swing wide, the water around the hull begins, very faintly, to shine. Something down there is waking up. It is a memory, the oldest one there is, before the boat, before the gates, before light itself, back when the whole universe was a single dark ocean with no shore. The first hour of the night is the hour of the beginning. Look over the rail and watch it rise. Look down over the rail, into the shining water, and let it take you back, all the way back. Further than that, keep going, before Egypt, before the river, before the first grain of sand in the first desert, before the sky, before the ground under the sky, before up and down had been invented, before time itself had anywhere to stand. There was water. That is the whole inventory. Water, and nothing else. The Egyptians called it Nun, and they were careful when they talked about it. In a way, I want to be careful now. Nun was not a sea, because a sea has a floor and a surface and a far shore, and Nun had none of those. Nun was not deep, because deep is a measurement, and there was nothing to measure from. It did not move, because there was no place to move to. It did not make a sound, because sound needs an ear, and there were no ears. It was dark, but not the way your bedroom is dark tonight, because your darkness is the absence of light, and this darkness came before light existed. So it was not missing anything. It was simply everything, everywhere, forever. Holding still, stay in that stillness a moment. Do not rush through it. The Egyptians never did. 3,000 years of their theology begins in this exact silence. And the priests who wrote about it said something strange and wonderful. The kind of detail that tells you they had actually sat with the idea at night. They said the water was not dead. They said the water was asleep. And inside that sleep, the way a dream forms without anyone deciding to dream it, something was gathering. No account tells us how long it took, because how long is a question from our side of the story. But somewhere in that endless dark water, at no particular place, since there were no places yet, something began to want. Want is almost too strong a word, and every word is too strong for this. But the texts keep circling the same idea, a stirring, en intention, a point in the darkness that was slightly more awake than the darkness around it. The Egyptians, who were not afraid of large sentences, put it this way: in the beginning, the water dreamed, and the dream wanted to open its eyes, and then, on what I suppose we have to call the first morning, though there had never been a morning, it happened. The water broke, in the middle of nothing, at the center of nowhere. The surface of none folded back, and something rose out of it. And the first thing that ever happened in the history of the universe was happening, and there was no one there to see it, which is the loneliest fact in this entire story. What rose was a mound, a hill of dark earth, glistening, streaming water down its sides. The first solid thing, the first here in an ocean of everywhere. The Egyptians called it the Ben, the first mound, and they never stopped thinking about it. And before this night is over, I am going to show you that you have been carrying a picture of it in your wallet your whole life. But hold that. Stay at the waterline, because on the crest of that first hill, in the darkness of that first moment, stood the reason this night exists. Our God alone knew. The first person in the universe, standing on the first ground. In the last darkness there would ever be. No father made him. No mother carried him. There was nobody to make him and nobody to carry him. And the Egyptian priests, who wrote down everything, faced this problem with complete honesty. They said he made himself. He is the God who came into being by himself. They wrote, and if you feel your mind slide off that sentence, you are in good company, because their minds slid off it too, and they kept writing it anyway, because it was the truest thing they knew. Existence did not receive its founder from somewhere else. Existence sat up on its own, and then, standing on the wet crest of the first hill, the new God did the first deed ever done. He opened his eyes. Light, not a sunrise. There was no sun to rise, no sky to rise into. This was the original light. The light, all other light, is a copy of, and it went out from him in every direction at once and did not stop, because there was nothing to stop it. For the first time, the water of none had a surface, because light was touching it. For the first time, there was a difference between one direction and another. The darkness that had been everything became, in a single instant, merely the background, and it has never forgiven the light for that. And I will say no more about that grudge until the 7th hour. The sun was rising for the first time. Now, the Egyptians told the story of this moment in more than one way, and I am not going to pick one for you, because they refused to pick one for themselves, and their refusal is the most honest thing about them. In the temples of one city, they said what I have just said, the mound, and the God standing on it. In other tellings, the thing that rose from the water was a flower, a single blue lotus, which climbed toward nothing, and opened, and there in the heart of the petals sat the newborn light, a golden child in a blue cradle, and, in others still, the first thing was a sound. Arbir, a great grey heron they called the Bennu, came flying out of nowhere across the dark water, landed on the first stone, opened its throat, and let out a single, enormous cry. And that cry cracked the silence of eternity and set time itself moving, like a clock struck once and running ever since. A hill, a flower, a bird call at dawn, 3 pictures, painted by one people, of the same unpaintable second. They are not competing. They are all true, the way 3 windows on the same sunrise are all true. Something rose, something opened, something called out, and the universe began. Here is the anchor for this chapter, the one I promised, and it is sitting in your wallet. The Egyptians never forgot that first mound. They built it, over and over, for 3,000 years. The Ben became a sacred stone, kept in the sun, God's holiest temple, shaped into a point like a hill rising to a peak, and that shape became the capstone of every pyramid, and the pyramids themselves. All of them are that first hill built enormous in stone. the moment of creation pinned to the desert floor at full scale. And the shape traveled. It crossed oceans and centuries. And in 1782 it landed somewhere you would never expect. Take out a $1 bill tomorrow morning and turn it over. On the back, on the left side, there is a pyramid with a shining eye above its peak, hovering right where the capstone belongs. An eye at the top of the first hill, radiating light. Americans argue about what that symbol means, and the full story of how it got there runs through Latin mottos and founding committees. But the picture itself, the eye of light above the primeval mound, is the oldest picture there is. It is this chapter. It is the first morning of the universe, printed by the billions, folded into pockets and purses in every town in America, handed across every diner counter from Maine to San Diego. The oldest story on Earth rides around in our genes, and almost nobody knows they are carrying it. Back on the boat now. The first gate is sliding behind us, and the shining in the water is changing, and the old god in the shrine has not moved, but his eyes are open, and they are fixed on the glow over the rail. Of course they are. He is watching himself, young, at the beginning of everything, standing alone on a hill in the middle of an ocean with light pouring off him and absolutely no one to show it to. The first person in the universe had just been born, and he had no world, no no family, no voice to answer his. The next thing he made because of that. Not because the universe needed architecture, because the light was lonely. That memory is rising now, just ahead of us, where the water is beginning to glow again. The second hour of the night is the hour of the family. Watch. Every family on Earth started somewhere, and this is the story of the family that everything else is descended from, told the way the priests of the sun told it. On the second hour of the night crossing, the young god stood on his hill, blazing, and took stock, light, as far as light could reach, which was forever, water under it, in every direction, which was also forever, and that was the entire universe. One hill, one god, one endless shining sea, and a silence so complete that his own heartbeat must have sounded like a drum in an empty hall. Power was not his problem. He had all of it. Every scrap of power that would ever exist, concentrated in one person. His problem was the oldest problem there is, and no amount of power touches it. There was no one else. So, the Creator, in the plainest sense, got to work. And what he made first was not the sky, and it was not the earth. It was company. He spoke, or he breathed, and the accounts describe the mechanics differently and with a directness that has made translators blush for 2 centuries. But what matters is what stood before him when it was done. 2 children, the first 2 beings ever made by another being, a son, whose name was Shu, and the moment he existed, the universe had air in it, dryness, breath, the clean, empty space between things, and a daughter, Tefnut, and the moment she existed, the universe had moisture, mist, the soft, grey mercy that would one day become rain and dew and every cloud, breath and mist, a boy of air and a girl of water vapor, the dry and the damp, the 2 hands the world would be built with, and for one moment, the universe held its first family, 3 people on one hill in an infinite sea, and the light was not alone anymore. Then the children disappeared. They were young, and the dark water was everywhere, and none was deep beyond all sounding. And somehow, in that trackless black, the 2 children wandered from the light and were gone. No text tells us how long they were lost, and I have come to believe the silence is the point, because for a parent, All such time is the same length, and its name is forever. Now watch what the Creator does, because this small, strange scene is the seed of half the story ahead of us tonight. And almost nobody who retells this myth bothers with it. The young god reached up to his own face, and he took hold of his own eye, and he removed it. The Egyptians said it exactly that plainly. The eye of the god was not stuck in his head the way yours is. It was a power, maybe the greatest of his powers. The seeing, searching, finding part of him, and it could be sent. He drew it out of himself, and it hung before him burning, his own sight made separate, and he gave it the only order that mattered. Find my children. And the eye went out over the black water like a lantern going out over a lake at midnight. One point of moving light in all that dark, sweeping, hunting, refusing every depth. And somewhere out in the nowhere it found them, two small gods clinging together in the dark. And it gathered them in, and it brought them home. You would think this story ends in an embrace. And it does, but it ends in something else first. And here is where I need you to pay close attention, because the thing that happens next will come back in the deep middle of this night, wearing a lion's face. While the eye was away searching, the god had grown another. When his firstborn eye came home out of the darkness, leading the lost children, it found a new eye sitting in its place in the Creator's face, shining as if it had always been there. And the firstborn eye stopped, and understood, and burned with a rage that the texts describe with real fear. It had gone into the dark alone. It had done the finding, done the saving, carried the light where the light had never been asked to go, and it had been replaced. The first anger in the history of the universe was not a rebel's anger or an enemy's anger. It was the anger of the loyal one, the one who did everything asked, and came home to find the door already filled. Hold that shape in your hands tonight. Feel the weight of it. There is a whole hour of this night, far down in the dark ahead of us. That is nothing but this exact anger grown to the size of a country. And when we get there, I want you to remember where it started. In the first family, on the first hill, before the world had even been built. But this first time, the fire was put out with tenderness, and the way it was put out became one of the most famous images on earth. The Creator did not argue with his eye, and he did not punish it. He picked it up, and he set it on his brow, above the new eye, above everything, in the place of highest honor. And he changed its shape so that all creation would know its rank. He made it a cobra, a rearing golden cobra, hood spread, fixed at the center of his forehead, the first and fiercest of his powers. Promoted to the crown itself, the Egyptians called it the Uraeus. And, from that day on, no image of Ra was complete without the serpent on his brow. And every pharaoh who ever ruled Egypt wore that same rearing cobra on the front of his crown. 30 centuries of kings carrying the memory of the day. The sun god soothed his own angry eye by wearing it like a crown jewel. You have seen it 100 times. The golden mask of Tutankhamun, the one that has toured American museums and stopped every crowd that ever shuffled past it, has the cobra right there above the boy king's eyes. Now you know what it is. It is a peace treaty, the oldest one in the world, struck between the light and its own temper, and the treaty held. Mostly, and the word mostly is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. And the 7th hour knows it. The family was whole again. And now the family grew. Shu and Tefnut, Breath and Mist, had children of their own, and their children were enormous. Asson, Geb, who was the earth itself, the actual ground, brown and green and solid. The first thing you could stand on that was not the original hill, and a daughter, Nut, who was the sky, and Geb and Nut, earth and sky, loved each other. And here the Egyptians told a story so beautiful and so strange that once you hear it, you never see the horizon the same way again. In the beginning, they said, the earth and the sky lay together, pressed close, skin to skin, with no gap between them at all, and the world could not begin, because there was no room for it. Nothing could grow, nothing could fly, nothing could breathe, because the sky lay flush against the earth, the way a sleeping child lies against a parent, and all of creation waited in the space that did not exist yet. So Shu, the heir, their father, did the hardest thing a father ever did. He stepped between his children, and he set his feet on the earth, and he put his shoulders under the sky, and he lifted, he raised Nut up, and up, arching her over the world, until her fingertips touched one horizon, and her toes touched the other. Her body bent above the earth, in a great vault strewn with stars, held there forever on the lifted arms of the air, and in the space between her and Geb, in the gap that Shu holds open to this day. Everything else happened. Every bird, every cloud, every breath you have ever taken, you took inside that lifted space. In the room the air holds open between the earth and the sky. The one became two, the two became four, and the silence began to fill with names. The Egyptians painted that scene for thousands of years. Nut arched over the world, blue and spangled with stars, Shu beneath her with his arms raised, Geb reclining below. And here is tonight's anchor, because you can go stand under it, in the valley of the kings, in the tomb of the pharaoh Seti the First. The burial chamber's ceiling is a deep blue field of stars with the sky goddess stretched across it. And travelers by the thousands walk down those steps every single week and stand where the sarcophagus once lay and look up at Nut, exactly as this chapter has described her. And on that same ceiling, and on tomb walls all through that valley, runs something else, painted in careful registers like the panels of a map. A river, a boat, 12 gates, the complete chart of the journey you are on right now, drawn 3,200 years ago in colors that have not finished being bright. The Egyptians did not just tell this night. They illustrated it, sealed it in the dark, and left it for us. And when the lamps of the archaeologists first swung across those ceilings, the boat was still sailing there, mid-crossing, right where they left it, back on deck. The second gate is behind us now. The old god has leaned forward in his shrine, just slightly, watching the glow of this memory fade in the water. The hill, the children, the lifted sky, the universe he built now had a floor and a ceiling and a family to live in it. It had everything. In fact, except the one thing this whole night has been missing so far. Us. Because look around the deck. Look out over the dark water, and notice what has not appeared anywhere in this story yet. People. In the whole shining new universe, there is not one single human being. No farmer, no fisherman, no child, no name that sounds like our names. The world at this point in the story is a masterpiece with no audience. A stage set with the lights on and nobody in the seats. The third hour of the night is where we come from. And I have to tell you, of all the stories humanity has ever told about its own beginning, and every people on earth has one, the Egyptian version may be the strangest and the most tender of them all, because we were not planned, and we were not sculpted, and we were not commanded into being. We were wept. The water ahead is starting to shine again, and this time, the old god in the shrine has turned his face away from the rail. He knows which memory is rising. It is the one that still hurts. The third gate is opening ahead of us, and something on this boat has changed. The crew feels it too. Sia, at the prow, has gone very still. The rowers have slowed without being told, and in the golden shrine, the old god has turned his face away from the water, away from the glow rising off our bow. And, for the first time tonight, he looks less like a king on a throne and more like a man in a waiting room, bracing for a name to be called, whatever memory is waking up down there. He does not want to watch it surface, so we will watch it for him. That is what we came for. Lean on the rail. The glow spreads, and the picture forms, and it is the young universe again, floor and ceiling in place, the sky arched and starred, the earth green beneath it, the air holding the whole thing open, and in the middle of it stands the Creator in his full youth, gold and burning, looking out over a finished world. And the world was perfect, and the world was silent, and he stood in it, completely alone. Yes, there was family now, air and mist, earth and sky, the great powers, each one holding up its corner of existence. But you personally know, that there is a kind of loneliness that being surrounded does not fix. The powers were his children, and they were busy being the universe. What the Creator did not have was anyone to see it. Anyone small. Anyone standing inside the world looking up. Instead of holding it open from outside, he had built the greatest thing that would ever be built. And there was no one to walk through it in the morning and say so. The Egyptians did not tell us what he was feeling in that hour. They were wiser than that. They only told us what happened next. And they let the happening carry all the feeling. And here it is, the way the old texts hand it down. The god wept, that is all. No thunder, no plan, no announcement to the assembled powers of creation. The maker of everything stood in the middle of everything, and his eyes filled, and the tears came, and they fell from that golden face, down through the new air, and landed on the earth, and where each tear struck the ground, a human being stood up. One tear, one person, another tear, another. The tears kept falling, and the people kept rising, out of the wet earth, blinking in the light. They were made from the first men and the first women, our whole family line. Beginning in the exact moment, the strongest being in existence broke down. The priests of the sun loved this story with a special love, and part of it was in the words themselves, because in their language this is very nearly a poem you can hold in one hand. The word for tears was remite. The word for people was remich. Tears, remit, people, remit, one small sound apart. The Egyptians heard their own name for themselves inside the word for weeping, and they drew the conclusion straight across. We are the tears of Ra. Now, was that the only story Egypt ever told about where people came from? It was not, and I will not pretend otherwise. Other temples, other tellings, but this is the one the sun priests kept, and this is the one that runs under everything else that happens tonight. So this is the one the water is showing us. Stay with the picture one more moment, because I want you to notice what kind of beginning this is. Other nations told of gods who molded people from clay, deliberate as potters, or spoke them into being like a command issued down a chain. The Egyptians said, we leaked out of a lonely god by accident, that we are made of grief and light in equal parts. And honestly, I have always thought they were onto something. It would explain a great deal about us. Why sad songs feel true, why we cry at weddings, at reunions. At the exact moments, joy arrives, as if the body remembers its original ingredient. Why every one of us stops, without deciding to. When the sun goes down, the first people spread out across the young world, and the Creator watched them go, and whatever hole had been in him, They filled it. They built the first villages along the first river. They planted things, and the things grew, because the light loved them. They looked up, squinting at the brightness, and gave it a name. The first name humans ever gave anything. And the name was Ra. He had a world, and now the world had witnesses. And the texts say that for a long age, the Maker and the Maid were happy together. And I am going to let that sentence stand alone for a breath, because it does not get to be true forever, because here is the strange, sad arithmetic buried in this beautiful story. And the old God, sitting behind us with his face turned away, has already done this math 1,000,000 times. If the people came from his tears, then his own sorrow is loose in the world, walking around on 2 legs, multiplying. Creatures made of light and grief carry both inheritances, and light is loyal, but grief is restless, and restless things forget where they came from, far ahead of us, hours down the river. There is a memory waiting where that forgetting comes due, a day when the children of the tears looked up at their Maker and saw not the light that made them, but an old man they thought they could take. Keep tonight's picture beside that one when it comes. The tears, and the standing up, and the first villages in the first light. Remember where they came from. There will come an hour when they do not, and the sun will never forget that they forgot. The third gate slides past. In the shrine, the old God has turned back toward the water, now that the weeping is done, and if you look closely at that ancient golden face as the glow fades, you will see something that was not there before, and I promise I am not inventing it. The tomb painters put it there themselves, the faintest line of brightness at the corner of one eye. Some memories the light carries, some it still sheds. The 4th hour of the night is a kind hour, and heaven knows we have earned one. The water ahead is glowing again, but differently this time, broad and warm and steady, like lamplight under the whole river at once. And the memory rising in it is not a moment, it is an age, the best age, the one every Egyptian, for 3,000 years, privately believed the world had been falling away from ever since, the age when the sun was not far away in the sky, but here, on the ground, living among his people as their king, because that is the part we always leave out when we tell children about the Egyptian sun god. Ra did not start out as a light overhead. He started out as a ruler underfoot, the first pharaoh, a king you could physically walk to. His palace stood on the earth. His court was the gods themselves, and his subjects were the brand new human race, the Terre-born, the Remech, farming the first fields under the direct, in-person supervision of the being who had wept them into existence. Think about what mornings were. In a world like that, the king wakes, and the day exists because he woke. He steps out, and the light goes out ahead of him like heralds. He crosses his kingdom, east to west, the original royal progress, the commute that all sunrises are the memory of, and everything he passes stands a little straighter. Crops lean toward him, rivers run brighter, and the people in the fields look up, and there he is, not a myth, not a disc, their actual neighbor, the landlord of everything, making his rounds, and under that daily crossing, the world worked. I want to show you how it worked, because the Egyptians had a word for it, and the word was Mart. And if I stood here and lectured you about cosmic order and universal balance, you would be asleep in the wrong way within a minute. So forget the lecture. Here is Mart, as an Egyptian farmer would have known it. The river rises when it is supposed to rise. That is Mart. Every summer, on schedule, the Nile swells and spreads brown and generous over the fields. And every autumn, It withdraws and leaves the soil, fat and black and ready. And a man can plant in September knowing there will be a harvest to hand his children in the spring. Mart is being able to make a promise about next year. It is the judge in the village settling a dispute, and both farmers walking home, believing the settlement will hold. Because the same light that ripens the wheat is watching the verdict. It is scales that weigh true in the market. It is the door you can leave unlatched. It is time itself behaving. Days the same length as yesterday's days. Stars keeping their appointments. The whole machinery of the world running so faithfully that a person can stop bracing for chaos and simply live. That is what Ra was king of. Not light as brightness. Light as reliability. The Egyptians did not worship the sun because it was beautiful. Plenty of things are beautiful. They worshipped it because it was the one thing that always came back. And his city. The king of the world needed a capital. And its glow is rising in the water right now. And of all the memories we will pass tonight, this one has traveled the farthest to reach your ears. The Egyptians called it Iunu. The Bible calls it On. The Greeks, when they finally saw it, could think of only one possible name, and they called it Heliopolis, City of the Sun. It was old beyond guessing even in Egypt, where everything was old, and at its heart stood the great temple of Ra, and at the heart of the temple stood the Ben, the sacred stone shaped like the first mound, the one from the first morning of the universe. And the whole city ran on light, the way other cities ran on trade. Hold the name Heliopolis. Near the end of our crossing tonight, I am going to tell you where a piece of that city is standing at this exact moment. And if you live in a certain American city, you have jogged past it now. A king who crosses his kingdom every single day is a king you see at every hour. And his people, watching him pass over a lifetime, noticed something, and what they noticed became the deepest and strangest idea in all of Egyptian religion. So come at it gently, the way they did, by simply looking. Look at the sun at dawn. It is small and mild and new, and you can almost hold your eyes on it. It climbs like something young climbing, quick and eager, all promise. No wait. Now look at noon. If you can, nothing mild there. Full strength, full authority. A hammer of light standing straight overhead. The king at the height of his reign. Impossible to face directly, and needing nothing from anyone. Now, look at evening. The fire has banked. The light has gone heavy and golden and slow. And the disk that punished your eyes at midday sits fat and red on the horizon, and you can stare straight at it, the way you can suddenly hold the gaze of a strong man gone old. Morning, noon, and evening. The Egyptians looked at those three suns, and they did the honest thing. They gave each one its own name. The morning sun they called Khepri, and they drew him, wonderfully, as a scarab beetle. And I owe you the reason, because it is not obvious, and it is pure Egypt. The scarab is the humble dung beetle, and Egyptians watched it do something no other creature does. It gathers a ball, and it rolls that ball across the ground, patiently, tirelessly, pushing a sphere many times its own size along the earth. And then, from that buried ball, in time, new beetles emerge, as if the roller had made life itself out of a rolling ball. There, said the Egyptians, pointing at the humblest insect in the yard. That is the morning, something small and determined, pushing the great ball of the sun up over the rim of the world. Self-starting, self-made, life coming out of the roll itself. The noon sun was Ra outright, the king in power, the name that ruled the other names, and the evening sun they called Atum, the old one, the finisher, the form the Creator takes when the day's work is done, and the weight of it shows. 3 names. And here is the part to take slowly, because this is where Egypt stops resembling every other mythology you know. Khepri, Ra, and Atum were not 3 gods taking shifts. They were not a relay team. They were one being at 3 ages. And all 3 ages were true at once. And no Egyptian lost a minute of sleep over the arithmetic. To them, a god could remain exactly himself while becoming something younger, or older, or larger. The way the river at its source and the river at its mouth are 2 different characters and one river. And honestly, you already believe a version of this. The person you were at 7 years old, the person you are today, and the person who will someday sit in your chair as an elder are 3 different people by almost every measure. And they are also, stubbornly, one. You are a syncretism too. You just never had a priesthood write it down. So the king crossed his kingdom, morning after morning, age after age, born a beetle, reigning a king, setting an elder, and rising a beetle again. And the world beneath him ran on Mart like a clock that loved its own ticking. One more thing before the gate, and then the anchor I owe you. All of this daily glory ran on wheels, so to speak, and the wheels were a boat. Thick, not this dark boat we ride tonight. Her sister, the day boat, the bright one, the Manjet, the vessel of the morning crossing, and the memory of her is going to rise in the water 2 gates from now. And when it does, I want you braced, because of everything we passed tonight. That one is going to be the hardest for the old man in the shrine to look at. The evening of a life is not made bitter by its failures. It is made bitter by its noons. Now the anchor, and it is probably in a museum near you. That scarab beetle, Khepri, the little roller of the morning sun, became the single most beloved good luck charm in the ancient world. Egyptians carved scarabs by the hundreds of thousands, in stone and faience and gold, pierced them, strung them, wore them over the heart in life and sealed them over the heart in death. Each one a tiny engine of the same prayer. Let the sun rise again. Let me rise with it. They made so many that today there is hardly a serious museum on the American map without a case of them. Boston, Chicago, Kansas City, Los Angeles, and the big glass cases at the Metropolitan in New York hold them by the tray. Millions of people drift past those little beetles every year and read the label and move on. You will not move on. Not anymore. Next time you are standing at that glass, you will know you are looking at the morning sun in its work clothes, still pushing, and you will know its name. The 4th gate is opening. The old god has been sitting straighter through this whole hour, and who could blame him? Every grey head straightens a little, passing the glow of its own best years. But a king on the ground, my friend, is a king within reach. Hold that thought as the gate goes by. The next hours of the night know exactly what it means. Every kingdom on earth keeps its treasure somewhere, and the 4th hour of the night is carrying us past the vault. The glow in the water has narrowed and sharpened, and what rises out of it now is a skyline. Low white buildings, a wall, a gate facing the sunrise, and above the rooftops, catching the first light of a morning, 3,000 years gone, a pair of stone needles pointing straight up at heaven. This is Unu. This is Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and I told you to hold its name. And now I am going to walk you through it, because no city that ever existed, and I am including Rome, and I am including Jerusalem, packed more consequence into fewer streets. Understand first what this place was for. Other Egyptian cities made things. Memphis made government. Thebes made empire. Heliopolis made sense. It was the place where Egypt kept its explanation of the universe, the home office of the story you have been hearing all night. The first mound, the lonely creator, the tears. The priests of Heliopolis were the ones who wrote that story down and taught it up and down the river. And they were something more too. Something we would recognize instantly. They were scientists. The priests of the sun watched the sky for a living, night after night, generation after generation, tracking the stars with a patience that only religion can fund. They mapped the year. They fixed the calendar. They were the timekeepers of the ancient world. And when the Greeks finally started producing their own famous thinkers, those thinkers did a revealing thing. They packed their bags and went to Heliopolis to study. The traditions say Plato himself walked those streets as a student. The city of the sun god was, for most of recorded history, quite simply where you went to learn how the world worked. And I love that, because it means the oldest story in this night and the oldest science on Earth grew up in the same building. And neither one thought that was strange. At the heart of the city stood the great temple. And here is where Heliopolis will surprise you, because you think you know what an Egyptian temple looks like. Dark halls, forests of columns, and somewhere in the deepest room, a small black chamber where the god's statue lives in permanent midnight, visited by priests with lamps. That is how every other god in Egypt was housed. The sun god's holiest places broke the pattern in the most logical way imaginable. At their center, instead of a roofed sanctuary, stood a great open courtyard, and in the courtyard an altar, and over the altar nothing at all, no roof, no ceiling, open sky, because every other god in Egypt had to be represented, carved in stone, imagined in the dark. This god showed up in person, every morning, on schedule. The deity himself cleared the eastern wall and stood over his own altar, and the offerings went up in real light. No statue required, no imagination required. Attendance was the whole point. Egyptians lived surrounded by gods they had to picture. Here was the one god you could simply look at, and his temple was, in a sense, a room with the lid off, a box built for the one being no box could hold. Sit with how confident that architecture is. You do not build an open-air temple unless you are certain, absolutely certain, that your God is coming back tomorrow. And from this city, that certainty reached out and picked up the whole Egyptian state. Here is the piece of this hour that historians can hold in their hands. At some point early in the story of the pharaohs, the kings of Egypt began adding a phrase to their royal names, a title, 5 little hieroglyphs, a duck and a disc, and the phrase was son of Ra. Every pharaoh took it, not some pharaohs, not the pious ones, every ruler of Egypt, dynasty after dynasty, conqueror after builder after boy king, for the better part of 3,000 years, formally introduced himself to eternity as the son of the sun, Khufu, who raised the Great Pyramid, Hatshepsut, who wore the crown as a woman and dared the priesthood to object, Ramesses, who signed the world's first surviving peace treaty, Cleopatra at the very end, Greek by blood and Pharaoh by title, all of them, one family on paper, and the father of record, every single time, was the god in the shrine behind us. When Egyptians looked at their king, the state was asking them to see a sunbeam that had put on a crown, authority itself. In the oldest big country in the world was a franchise of the light. There has never been another brand like it. Rome borrowed it. Louis XIV of France called himself the Sun King and built Versailles around the conceit. 4,500 years late to the idea. The pharaohs held it first and held it longest. And they got it from the low white city gliding past our rail right now. Now, the needles. Look up at them. That pair of stone points above the rooftops. Because I owe you a debt from the last hour, and this is where I pay it. Those are obelisks. Single pieces of granite, cut whole from the quarries upriver. Each one tall as a 10-story building, tapering to a small pyramid at the tip. And that tip is the Benben, the first mound, the same shape from the first morning of creation, lifted into the air and sheathed in bright metal, so it caught the dawn before anything else in Egypt. An obelisk is a sunbeam that somebody built. Heliopolis raised them in pairs at its gates, and they were the city's signature. And when the city finally died, when the temples emptied and the scholars scattered and the stones of the sun god's house were carted off to build medieval Cairo, the obelisks were too enormous to bother destroying. And so they did something stranger. They traveled. Emperors collected them. Romans hauled a dozen to Italy, which is why the piazzas of Rome bristle with Egyptian granite to this day. And in the 1800s, the government of Egypt gave away a pair that had stood together for 35 centuries, 1400 years before the birth of Christ. Both of them citizens of Heliopolis originally, both of them already ancient when Cleopatra was born, which did not stop the world from nicknaming them Cleopatra's Needles. One went to London and stands on the Thames tonight. The other one went to New York. If you are listening to me anywhere near Manhattan, put on shoes tomorrow and go look at it. Because I am not describing a replica, and I am not describing a fragment. 69 feet of rose granite, 220 tons. The genuine article, floated across the Atlantic in 1880 inside the hull of a steamship, rolled through the streets on cannonballs, and set up on a knoll in Central Park directly behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where it has now stood for more than 140 years, which sounds impressive until you remember it is the newest thing that has ever happened to it. Joggers pass it all day, dog walkers, stroller pushers, tourists hunting the museum entrance. Thousands of people a week glance up at it without breaking stride, and almost none of them know what they are looking at. It is a piece of the city of the sun. It stood at the gates of the story you are inside right now. Priests, we have no names for, watch 10,000 sunrises break on that exact stone. And it is in New York, in the park, out in the weather, older than almost every human structure on the continent, by an order of magnitude, waiting behind the Met with 3,500 years of patience for somebody walking a beagle to stop and really see it. The city is sliding astern now, taking its white walls and its morning light back down into the dark water, and the old god watched it go all the way to the last glimmer. Of course he did. Everyone looks longest at the house they were happiest in. Ahead, the fifth gate is opening on the widest hour of the night, and the glow rising past. The prow is not a city, and not a family, and not a morning. It is gold, and it is moving, and it is shaped exactly like the deck underneath your feet. We are about to meet this boat's sister, the bright one, the one that got the daylight. Every workhorse knows about the show horse. Every night shift knows what the building looks like at noon. And this old dark boat we are riding, patched and quiet and strong, has spent eternity sharing a god with the most glorious vessel that ever moved. And in the fifth hour of the night, the two of them pass each other in the dark, memory and hull, and we are here for it. Look off the bow. The water is filling with gold. She rises the way dawn rises, which is fitting, because she is the dawn, the day boat, the morning bark, the ship the Egyptians called Man-Jet, and also called by a name so beautiful I want you to hear it in full. The boat of millions of years. That was her registry. Millions of years was her route, her schedule, her warranty, all in one phrase. The vessel commissioned to carry the sun across the sky of every single day the universe would ever contain, and the memory rising around us now is one of her days. Any of her days. In the deep noon of the golden age. So climb the rail of your mind and ride along. Because Egyptians dreamed of doing exactly this, the way other nations dreamed of paradise. It is morning on the eastern horizon of the world. The day boat stands ready on a river of sky, and her deck is crowded with gods. Sia is aboard. Perception, watching the route ahead. And Hika, magic, the power of the word. And whose whole being is command. The authority in a spoken order. And Thoth, the scribe with his long ibis beak, keeper of the log. Because even a perfect voyage gets written down. Mart herself rides near the prow. Order in person. A single feather standing upright in her hair. And her presence on the manifest is the whole point of the trip. Where this boat sails, the world stays true, and amidships, under a canopy of light, stands the captain, and he is nothing like the old man in the shrine behind us. This is Ra at the summit, Ra at Nuun, the king in the full furnace of his strength, crowned with the disk and the rearing cobra, gold without one shadow on it. This is the version of himself that the old god has been watching for all night. And now that the memory is here, notice that he has risen from his throne inside the shrine and come forward to the rail beside us. And he is holding it with both golden hands. The bright boat casts off, and the day begins. And the world beneath her wakes up like an orchestra tuning. Light runs down the mountains and spills across the delta. Mist burns off the river in long silver sheets. Farmers are already in the fields, and they straighten up as the warmth reaches them. Faces tip to the boat. They cannot quite see inside the brightness. And in the villages, the smoke of 10,000 breakfast fires goes up straight and easy into a windless morning. Fishermen push off into water that has turned to hammered light. Children run along irrigation banks for no reason except that their legs work and the sun is up. Every temple in Egypt swings its doors east. The whole country, the whole world, is performing the same quiet act at the same moment, turning toward the boat, like a field of sunflowers with one name in its mouth, and around the hull itself. Listen, the air is thick with souls. This is my favorite detail in all of Egyptian religion. And it is real. It is in the texts. The blessed dead, the ones who lived rightly and passed every trial, were promised the greatest reward that priesthood could imagine. And the reward was a job. They got to crew this boat. Bird souls with human faces wheel around the rigging. The worthy dead man the tow ropes, and haul. And the texts have them singing while they do it. An eternity of mourning spent pulling the sun into the sky by hand. Think about a religion whose heaven is helping with this. Not rest, not clouds and idleness. A rope, a boat, a purpose. Forever. The Egyptians looked at eternal life and decided the best imaginable version of it was being useful to the light. All day she runs west, over the whole bright world. The king standing tall at the center. Order at the prow. The dead singing on the ropes. This is what the sun looked like from underneath for 3,000 years of Egyptian mornings. A working ship with a full crew, running her route on time. And late in the day, as the light goes long and heavy and the color of honey, she makes for the western mountains, and the horizon opens. And here is where the two boats meet. The moment we are riding through right now, because at the western gate, every single evening, the transfer happens. The bright boat comes to rest. The day crew stands down, and the passenger steps off Manjet's golden deck. And he is not the noon king anymore. The crossing itself has aged him, and he walks the gangway old and stooped. Gold, flesh, sagging on silver bones, and he boards her dark sister. This boat, the night boat, Urs, the show horse, takes the daylight. The workhorse takes the war, and the golden memory is fading in the water now, exactly the way an after-image fades when you close your eyes. And we are back in the plain dark. One lamp of a shrine, one spearman at the prow, the slow creak of the steering oar. The old god stands at the rail a moment longer, looking at the black water where his noon just sank. Then he turns and goes back to his throne and sits with the care of a man whose knees have opinions. And I will tell you the truth of everything we have passed tonight, the tears included. That was the one he gripped the rail for. Grief you can weep out, but there is no cure for having been magnificent. Let the boat run quiet a moment. Feel the difference in the hour. The gates behind us tonight were memory. The gates ahead of us are consequence. Because think, now, about everything the Golden Age was built on. A king in his full strength. A world in perfect order, because that strength enforced it. People made of tears and light. Obedient, because the light was close and enormous and daily. Now run the one arithmetic that no god and no kingdom has ever escaped. The crossing ages him, every day. By evening, he is old, and the people watching from the fields, year after year, century after century, are watching very closely, the way subjects always watch a throne. Sooner or later, in the long grass of all that watching, a thought is going to stand up on two legs, the first truly dangerous thought in the history of the world, and it is going to whisper itself from field to field. He is old, and we are many. The sun has died every single night since the beginning of the world, and every morning, so far, it has won. I keep ringing that bell for a reason. Friend, you are about to find out what it sounds like when the challenge does not come from the dark below. It comes from the daylight, from his own kingdom, from the tears themselves. The sixth gate is opening, and the glow beyond it is not gold. It is the color of a whisper. Something is waiting in the seventh hour. We are in the fifth. But before the serpent comes the rebellion. Every ruin on earth started as a rumor. Every fallen throne, every burned city, every empire that is now a museum exhibit began the same way, with two people standing close together, and one of them lowering their voice. The sixth hour of the night is the hour of the lowered voice, and I want you to hear it the way the sun heard it, which is a terrible sentence. And by the end of this chapter, you will know why. The memory rising off the bow now is the golden age again. But late in the age. The way afternoon is late in the day. The world is still beautiful. The river still floods on schedule. The harvests still come. Mart still holds. But the king who walks this kingdom is not the king from the bright boat anymore. The crossing has been aging him every day since the first day. And by now the count of his days has no number. That means anything. And the age has begun to stay. It no longer washes off at dawn. He rises younger. Yes, but less younger. If you follow me. The way a man of 80 can have a good morning and still be 80. The gold flesh hangs looser on the silver bones. The steps across the sky take longer than they took. And when he holds audience on earth among his people, the people are close enough to see what the texts describe without flinching. The trembling mouth, the slow reply, the thin, bright line of silver at the corner of the lips of the God who made everything. Because the oldest body in existence has started, quietly, in front of the whole world, to fail. Now here is where I need you to stand in the fields for a minute. Not with the gods, with us, because the next part of this story belongs to us, and it does the human race no favors. And the Egyptians told it anyway, about their own ancestors, which took a kind of courage I want you to notice. Put yourself in the sandals of a farmer in the late Golden Age. You have never known a world without the king in it. Neither has your father, or his father, or any name in your family's memory. The light that ripens your barley is a person, and the person is old. And here is the thing about living close to a great power. Ore does not age well. Ore is a crop that needs distance to grow. And these people had no distance. They had a neighbor. They saw the god daily, the way you see the courthouse daily. And things seen daily get measured. And things measured get judged. And one harvest evening, somewhere along the river, in the long shadows after the day's work, it finally happened. Somebody said it out loud. Did you see him today? He looks worse. That is all. That is the whole spark. Not a battle cry. Not a manifesto. A remark. Made at dusk. In the tone people use about a boss whose hands have started shaking. And the remark did what remarks do. It traveled, field to field, village to village, moving at the speed of gossip, which is the fastest thing humans have ever built. And as it traveled, it grew, the way a whisper grows when nobody stands up to it. He is old. His mouth trembles. He repeats himself. His fire is banked. He forgets. And then one night, at the bottom of all the other whispers, the last one, the first 8 hours of this night have been waiting for, the one that turns a mood into a plot. He is old, and we are many. The Egyptians who wrote this story down called what happened next a conspiracy, and they meant the word. The children of the tears, the creatures who exist because the light was lonely, began to meet and listen to where they met, because the detail is in the old account, and it is the coldest detail in the whole affair. They met in the shade. They gathered in the places the light does not reach, in back rooms and canyon shadows and the dark before dawn. The born of light, hiding from the light to plan against the light. And they talked about their maker the way you talk about a thing, not a father, about what he had, about whether he could keep it, about how many of them there were, and how few of him. And now the terrible sentence comes due. I asked you to hear the whisper the way the son heard it. Here is what I meant. He heard all of it. Think about what he is. He is the light. He is not informed of things. He is present at them. Every shadow those plotters stood in was a shadow his own body cast. Every dawn meeting was adjourned because he arrived. The king of everything hung in the sky day after day, doing his rounds, warming the fields of the very people who were measuring him for a fall. And he heard every syllable, every snort, every lowered voice, because there is no such thing as out of earshot of the sun. And he did nothing. Day after day, he rose, he crossed, he set, he fought the dark, he rose again, and he let the whispers pile up in his old heart like snow on a roof. And if you want to know what finally moved, it was not his anger, it was his memory, because one evening, hanging above the western desert, listening to his children plot in the shade, the old god remembered something. Long ago, before people, before the world, when the universe was one hill and one family. 2 of his children had been lost in the dark water, and he had reached up to his own face and drawn out his own eye and sent it into the dark to do what had to be done. The eye that searches, the eye that finds, the eye that came home to find itself replaced, and burned with the first anger in the universe, and was soothed with a crown, and sits on his brow to this hour, a golden cobra, coiled, honored, waiting. The old god called the gods together, in secret, at night, which tells you everything about how far things had gone. The sun, holding meetings in the dark. The texts record him laying it out for the assembled powers. The whispers, the plots, the children of his own tears, sharpening their intentions against him. And then he asked his family the question that has ended 100,000 stories since. The question every wounded king eventually asks the room. What should I do to them? And the answer came back. And the account is blunt about it. Send your eye. On the deck of our boat. Right now. In the dark of the real night. The old god has raised one golden hand. Very slowly. And touched the cobra on his brow. The sixth gate is opening ahead of us. The glow beyond it is not gold. And it is not the color of a whisper anymore. It is the color of noon in the desert. The color of the sky at the hottest hour of the hottest day. When the light stops, being a blessing, and becomes a verdict. The eye opened, and this time it was not sent to find lost children in the dark. It was sent to find the found ones. In broad daylight. Hold on to something. There is a version of the sun that nobody prays to. Every people who ever lived under a hard sky knows it. Not the morning sun. The one that dries the dew and starts the day. The other one. The 2 in the afternoon sun in the worst week of August. The one that empties the streets of Phoenix and closes the trails outside Las Vegas. The one that makes a car hood untouchable and a desert lethal. The one the weather service issues warnings about in words like excessive and dangerous. Light with the mercy boiled off. Heat as a fist. Americans in the Southwest live with that sun a few weeks a year. And even with air conditioning and ice water, it changes how a whole city moves. Now, imagine that sun with a mind. Imagine it with a grievance. And imagine it walking. The memory breaking over the bow of our boat in the 6th hour is the morning the eye of Ra came down. And the old texts say that when it touched the earth, it took a body. Because a verdict needs hands. The shape it took was a woman with the head of a lioness. And her name, spoken carefully in Egypt for the next 3,000 years, was Sekhmet, which means simply the powerful one. Not powerful among others. The powerful one. The way you would say the tallest mountain and need no second word. The Egyptians described her precisely. The mane of a lion. The eyes of the hunting cat. That fixed amber stare that house cats still aim at birds through American windows. The stare with all the patience and none of the doubt. Breath so hot, the desert wind was named after it. When she walked, the account says, fire went before her. And I do not think that was poetry. I think it was reporting. From the point of view of anyone downwind, and here is the sentence I most need you to carry through this hour. The one that separates this story from every monster story you have ever heard. Sekhmet was not a monster that got loose. She was an order, being carried out. She was the loyal eye, the finder of lost children, the one who goes into the dark and does what has to be done. And she did not descend on humanity in a wild rage. She descended in obedience, dispatched by her own father against his own children. And everything that happened next happened because she was good at her job. I promised you when we boarded this boat that I would not soak this night in blood. And I will keep the promise. And I can keep it honestly. Because the horror of this memory was never the red. It was the quiet. The account does not linger on battles. Because there were no battles. There was no army on earth. There was no arguing with the fire. There was only before and after. Before, a valley of villages, smoke rising from cook fires, the ordinary noise of a kingdom, dogs and doors and children and gossip, all those whispers. After, the smoke rising from other things, and the noise gone. She moved up the river the way a brush fire moves up a canyon, and behind her the fields went silent. And the silence is what the texts remember. The places where the plotters had gathered in the shade. Silent. The back rooms. Silent. The whisper that had travelled field to field, village to village, at the speed of gossip, was now being erased along the same route, at the speed of a walking lioness, and the children of the tears fled into the desert to hide from the light, which you already know from this very night is the one thing that has never once worked. Up above, the old king watched. This is the pivot of the whole memory. So come, stand where he is standing, high over his kingdom, looking down at his own order in motion. He had wanted the whispering ended. It was ending. He had wanted the plotters punished. Look at the punishment go. Every mile of her progress was his command, executed flawlessly. And that, right there, is what began to break him. If she had disobeyed, if she had run wild, if she had exceeded the order, he could have been angry at her. And anger is easy. Anger is comfortable. Kings can live whole lifetimes inside anger. She had not exceeded anything. She was the exact size of his own sentence. He watched his rage walk the earth in a body, saw at full scale, in fire and silence, precisely what he had asked for. And the old account gives him a line at this point that I want you to hear almost straight, because 4,500 years have not improved on it. Looking down at the quiet valleys, the king of everything said, more or less, it is enough. I meant to punish them. I did not mean to lose them. So he called her home. He stood on the height of heaven, the account says, and he called his eye by name, called her his daughter, called her beloved, told her the sentence was served and the anger was over and she could stop now. Come home now. And Sekhmet looked up at her father, and she went back to work. Friend, every parent listening tonight, every person who has ever set something in motion and then tried to take it back with words, you already know this moment in your bones. And the Egyptians knew it in theirs, and they built it into the center of their oldest story about power. Some things, once, saw, do not answer to the sender. She was made of his rage, and rage does not have a recall switch. And the texts say the taste of her work had become sweet to her, and she no longer distinguished between the guilty and the rest, because fire does not check names. The plotters were long gone, and she was still walking. The whisper was dead, and she was still walking. And for the first time since the water opened its eyes at the beginning of the universe, the God who made everything stood in the sky over his own world and understood that he was not in control of what happened next. He had one night, the account says, she had bedded down with the dark, El Lion Du, planning to finish the human race at sunrise, one night, and the fate of every man, woman, and child on earth now hung on whether an old god, out of ideas and out of authority, could outthink his own anger before dawn. What he came up with, nobody would ever have guessed. Not a weapon, not a wall. The account says he sent his fastest messengers south, running through the dark, to the island of Elephantine at the far cataracts of the Nile, and what he told them to bring back, in bulk, with the whole human race in the balance, was red dirt. Dirt. Hold that in your hand until the next gate, and do not let anybody tell you how it ends. The 7th hour is close now, and before we face what waits in it, you are going to hear how the sun saved mankind from himself with 7,000 jars of beer. The longest night in the history of the world was not a night of battle. It was a night of brewing. Hold the picture from the last gate. Somewhere, out in the dark of the Golden Age, a lioness is sleeping off a day of destruction, planning to rise with the sun and finish the human race by dinner. And, up in heaven, the oldest being in existence, the god who spoke the universe awake, is pacing, because everything a god can do, he has already tried. Command has failed. She is command. Anger has failed. She is anger. If the sun rises on schedule, and the eye rises with it, mankind ends today, and the maker of everything will spend the rest of eternity as the king of an empty world, warming fields that no one plants, crossing a sky that no one watches. He will be, once again, precisely what he was on the first morning on the first hill, alone, and he has already wept the only people he is ever going to get. So he stopped thinking like a king, and he started thinking like an old man who knows his daughter. The messengers went south in the dark, the fastest runners heaven had, all the way to Elephantine at the far rapids of the Nile, and they came back hauling sacks of the thing the island was known for, a red ochre earth, a mineral the color of blood when you grind it fine and wet it down. And while they ran, the god woke the brewers. Every brewery in the river valley, the account says, was set to work in the middle of the night. The maidservants of the temples grinding barley by lamplight, mash tuns steaming in the dark, an entire civilization brewing against a deadline. And the deadline was sunrise. And the order of the king of the universe was simple. Beer. All of it. Now, 7,000 jars. The old account gives the number, and I love that it gives the number, because it means somebody counted, and you only count when it matters. 7,000 jars of strong beer, brewed in one night, and into every jar went the red earth of Elephantine, ground fine, stirred deep, until the beer was not beer to look at anymore. It was thick, and it was dark, and it was red, and in torchlight it looked like exactly one thing in the world. Now, north of where the Lioness slept, there lay a stretch of low fields. Right in the path she would walk at dawn to reach the last of mankind. And in the final hour of that night, the account says, the god himself carried the jars, or had them carried, out over those fields, and poured them, all 7,000. He flooded the fields with red beer, ankle deep, a shallow lake of it stretching to the edges of the dark, and the ochre held the color, and the foam settled, and the surface went still, and then heaven withdrew, and hid, and the whole universe held its breath and waited for the light. Dawn came. She always comes. That has been the whole point of this entire night. And the Eye of Ra rose with the morning and came down the valley to finish her work. Fire ahead of her, silence behind, and partway to the killing grounds she stopped, because the world in front of her was red, a lake of it, spread at her feet, calm as glass, and the great Lioness lowered her head to the surface, and what she saw looking back out of the red was her own face. The account pauses on that. Of all its moments, that one, the destroyer, bent over the flood, meeting her own reflection in what she believed was the finished work, her amber eyes looking up at her out of the red, and the texts say the sight pleased her. She was beautiful, and the red became her. And here, I will let the Egyptians say it their own way, because their sentence cannot be improved. She saw her face in it, and it was lovely. And she drank, and the more she drank, the lovelier it all became, the way the world does. And she waded in and drank deeper, 7,000 jars deep, until the strength went out of those terrible legs, and the great head grew heavy, and the fire banked itself down to embers, and in the middle of the red lake she had mistaken for her own victory. The most dangerous being ever unleashed on the earth lay down and rolled onto her side and slept. The sun stood over her all that day, guarding her sleep the way you would guard a sleeping storm. And when she finally woke, late, with the light going long, something had changed that no force in the universe could have changed by force. The account says the rage was gone, not defeated. You understand. Nobody defeated it. Nothing in existence could have. It had simply been laid down, the way a burden is laid down. And the goddess who stood up out of the red shallows and shook herself was not the lioness. She stood up as Hathor. And if Sekhmet was the sun as a verdict, Hathor was the sun as a blessing, the golden lady of music and love and dance, the most adored goddess Egypt would ever have. Joy in a body. The destroyer and the beloved were the same person. The Egyptians said that sentence without blinking and built the rest of their religion on it. The fire that ends everything and the warmth that grows everything were never two powers. They were one daughter. One, on two sides of one long night. And what stood between the two sides was nothing but an old father's trick, some red dirt, and 7,000 jars of beer. But do not let the beer fool you into thinking this story ends happy, because on our boat, in our real night, the old god has not smiled once during this entire memory. He got what he wanted. Mankind lived. His daughter came home gentle. And the account closes the episode with the king of everything speaking one of the saddest lines in ancient literature. A line that tells you the trick cost the trickster more than it cost anyone, looking out over the world he had just saved from himself. The old god said, "My heart is too weary to stay among them." Hold that line. It is the hinge of the whole night. And the next gate swings on it. The anchor first. Because this one you can raise a glass to. The Egyptians did not file this story away as a warning. They turned it into a party. Every year, in the season of the Nile flood, when the river itself ran red, brown with silt, as if on cue, Egypt held the festival of drunkenness. And I mean that as an official designation. Priests presiding, temple courtyards filled with people. The red-tinted beer went around by the jar. The music of Hathor played until the columns rang. And the whole point, the sacred, stated point, was to drink and rejoice and fall asleep in the temple, reenacting the sleep that saved the world, and be woken at dawn by drummers as the sun came up over the courtyard. Proof, standing in the sky, that mercy had held for one more year. And this is not legend. In the ruins of the temple of the goddess Mut at Luxor, archaeologists digging in recent decades uncovered a stone porch built for exactly these rites. Its inscriptions naming the festival outright. A columned porch of drunkenness raised by a pharaoh named Hatshepsut. You can stand on its stones today. Humanity was saved by beer once. The Egyptians insisted, and for 3,000 years they never once forgot the anniversary. The gate ahead now. Friend, the glow coming through it is soft, and high, and blue, and it is the color of distance. My heart is too weary to stay among them. He meant it. The next memory is the morning the sun packed up and left the earth for good. And the strange thing is, you have seen the leaving with your own eyes. You saw it the last time you looked up. The 7th hour is almost upon us. But first, the farewell. Some partings are announced. Most are just noticed. The memory rising in the water now is the last morning of the Golden Age. And no herald proclaimed it. And no calendar marked it. And the people who woke into it did not know what it was until it was over. It began quietly, in the throne room of heaven, with an old god telling his family a thing that every soul who has ever grown old has told a room at some point, in some words or other. I cannot do this anymore. Not the crossing. He did not mean the crossing. He meant the nearness, the daily audience, the living among. He had made these people out of his own grief, and loved them, and heard them whisper, and burned them, and saved them from the burning, and the whole account of it had left him hollowed out in a way that no dawn was going to fix. He did not hate mankind. Mark this. The texts are careful. He never hated them. He was simply done being within reach. Weariness, not wrath. His own words. My heart is too weary, and heaven heard him. And it was none who answered. The old dark water himself, the grandfather deep, who had held the whole universe before the first morning. And none's counsel was gentle, and it was this. Then rise, my son, go up, put the sky between yourself and what wearies you. And so it was done. And the way it was done is one of the tenderest pictures in all of Egyptian myth. The goddess Nut, the sky herself, the granddaughter, arched over the world with stars along her body, came down low, and took the form of an immense cow, vast beyond vastness, her hide the soft color of the hour before dawn, her eyes deep and kind, and the old god was helped up, and he sat upon her back, the way an elder is helped onto the gentlest animal in the herd. And Nut rose, slowly. The account says, she rose slowly, with her rider, up, away from the fields and the rivers and the villages of mankind, higher than the birds went, higher than the mountains stood, so high that the old texts admit she herself grew dizzy with the height, the sky trembling under her own altitude, and the god called for help for her, and 4 pairs of gods were stationed at her 4 legs to hold them steady forever, pillars of heaven, and Shu, her father, the heir, set his shoulders under her belly, holding his daughter up as he had held her up once before, at the beginning of the world, when she and the earth had to be parted so that everything else could live. The same lift, twice, once to make room for the world, once to make distance from it, and when the rising was finished, the sun was where you have always known it, far, high, a brightness overhead instead of a king next door, beautiful, and warm, and gone. The people below woke and went out, and the fields were lit as always, and the river shone as always, and it took them, I have always imagined, some time to understand. The light still came, the crops still grew, Mart still held. Order and truth did not leave with him. Mark that. But the throne on earth stood empty, and it stayed empty, and no one ever again met the Maker walking his rounds. Between mankind and its Father there was now a permanent open sky, and every human being who has looked up from that morning to this one, squinting, shading their eyes, feeling that mixture you have felt yourself on a bright day, warmth on your face, and something enormous just out of reach, has been standing in the ending of this exact story. That feeling has a plot. You have been living in its final chapter your whole life, and now the part I have been steering this whole night toward. The reason this chapter had to come exactly here, 7 gates deep, with the serpent's hour upon us, because the golden age was over, and the god had risen beyond the world's reach. But one problem rose with him, and it was the oldest problem on his ledger, and altitude could not fix it. The sun still sets, wherever he lived now, however high. The crossing still ended every evening at the western rim, and the light still had to get from there back to the east by morning, and there was still only one road, and the road ran down, under the earth, through the dark that is older than he is. So in that same hour of ordering the new heavens, the texts say, the old God ordered the underworld too. He established the Duat, the world below the world, mapped its regions, hung its 12 gates, appointed its guardians, and took upon himself, forever, the toll of passing through it. One full crossing of the country of the dead. Every night, alone with his crew. From now until the last morning of time, feel the deck under your hands. Friend, that is what you are standing on. This boat, this river, this hour, these gates, we have been passing all night long. None of it is scenery. It is the price. This whole dark kingdom is what the peace cost, the bill for the distance, drawn up by the God himself and paid by the God himself, nightly, without one night's default. Since the morning he left the earth on the back of the sky, he built his own hard road, and then he took it, and he has been taking it so long that down here, the road knows him. The old God has risen from his throne. I want you to see this, because he has not stood since the golden boat passed us 2 hours ago. He is standing now, at the front of the shrine, both hands free, and the crew has changed around him, without one order being spoken. The rowers have shipped their oars and taken up positions along the rails. Sia at the prow has gone forward as far as a being can go. Heka has begun, very low, under his breath, to speak the same words over and over, and the words are getting slowly louder. And the one at the point, the nameless one, the spearman whose silhouette I told you to remember in the second hour of this night, has planted his feet and levelled the long spear at the dark ahead and rolled his shoulders once, like a man who has done this 10,000 times and respects it more each time. Listen to the river. You will notice it in a moment, and once you notice it, you will not be able to stop noticing. The water ahead of us is going quiet, not calm, quiet. The small sounds are dropping away one by one. The lap against the hull, the creak of the steering oar, the whisper of current on the banks, each one arriving at silence, like instruments leaving a stage. Because up ahead, in the 7th hour, something is drinking the river. The sun has died every single night since the beginning of the world, and every morning. So far, it has won everything you have heard tonight. The first hill, the tears, the lioness, the leaving. All of it has been sailing toward the gate that is opening in front of us right now. No memory is going to rise from this water. Friend, the water is gone. The 7th hour is not a story on this river. The 7th hour is the reason for the boat. Hold. Before the 7th gate takes us, the river has one more thing to show, and it will not wait, because it cannot. Look back along the hull, at the last shining shallows behind us, where the water still lives. One final memory is rising there, and it is rising fast. The way something rises when it knows the door is closing. And on the deck, the old God has done a thing I have been waiting all night for you to see. He has laid one golden hand flat against his own chest, over the heart, over the place where, since before the first morning, he has kept the name, because the last memory has teeth. This is the story of the bite. It happened in the late age, after the leaving, when the sun ruled from the high sky and crossed the earth only in light. But listen, even a God who has left the world still touches it. His light walks the ground every day, and the texts say more than his light did. In his age, as he travelled, the old body betrayed him in the old body's way. The mouth trembled, and from the lips of the God who once spoke the universe awake, spittle fell and struck the earth, and lay there in the dust of his own road, and somebody was watching the road. Her name was Isis, and I want to introduce her properly, because what she does in this memory has been called wicked for 3,000 years by people who were not paying attention. Isis was a goddess of the young generation, the great-granddaughter of the sun's line, and she was, the texts say it flat out, the cleverest being in creation, not the strongest, the cleverest. She was a healer, the greatest one there was, mistress of medicine and of the spoken word. And she had a husband she would one day pull back from death itself, and a son not yet born, who would need every scrap of power she could gather to survive what was coming for him. That is her whole motive. And I want it on the table, before the snake is. Isis was not hungry for a throne. She was a mother arming herself, ahead of time, for a war she could see coming. And she had noticed the one thing in the universe that all the strength of heaven could not hide. The sun was old, and old things drop pieces of themselves. So she came to the road, after he had passed, and she gathered the fallen spittle of the god, and she mixed it with the dust it lay in, the earth of his own kingdom, and with hands that knew every craft, she kneaded the two together and shaped the mixture. And what she shaped was a serpent. Feel the full strangeness of that. She built it out of him, his own substance, his own decline, worked together with the common dirt. And because it was made of a god, it could do what nothing else in creation could do. It could wound one. She laid it on the path he crossed every day. At a fork the whole sky must pass. And she stepped back into the story's shadows and waited. She did not command it. She did not aim it. She had made a piece of his own age and left it lying in his own road. And then she let the day arrive. The god came in his glory, crossing as he had crossed since the first morning. And the serpent struck. The texts describe what followed with an honesty that still stings to read. The Lord of everything cried out, one great cry that shook heaven, and the fire went out of his limbs, and the cold came into them, and he shook, and his jaw chattered, the maker of the universe, chattering, and the poison climbed through him, the way the flood climbs the river markers. Steady, is, owning everything it passed. The gods came running from every corner of the sky, the whole shining family, and they crowded around him, and every healer in heaven tried a hand. And here is the terrible mechanism at the center of this memory. Nothing worked, and nothing could work, because every cure in existence was a cure for some outside thing, and this venom was not outside. It was made of him. He was being defeated by his own age, given a body and a fang, and there is no medicine in any world for that. And through the crowd of helpless gods, calm as morning, came Isis, and she knelt beside the burning, freezing king, and she said, and the old account preserves the scene almost like a play, tell me your name, Divine Father, for a person lives when their name is spoken. He knew. Of course he knew what she was really asking. And so, the oldest being in existence tried the oldest trick in existence. He gave her names. He gave her a flood of names. The whole shining resume. I am the maker of heaven and earth. He said, I am the one who made the horizons and set the gods in their places. I am Khepri in the morning, and Ra at noon, and Atum in the evening. And now you know, friend, why I stood you in front of those three faces back in the bright hours of this night. Because here, at the bottom of his agony, he spends all three. He lays down the morning, the noon, and the evening. 3 true names, 3 whole selves, the complete public identity of the sun. And the poison does not pause, and Isis kneels there and lets the great titles pile up. And then she says, gently, the most audacious sentence anyone ever said to him, your name is not among what you have told me. And the poison climbed, and the account says the sweat ran on him and the shivering worsened. And heaven stood in a ring around its king and understood that he was actually, truly, I'm going to go down into the dark with no boat and no crew and no morning after. Unless, and in the end, that every soul in that circle already saw coming. The sun said, in effect, "Come close." What happened next did not happen out loud. The texts are exact about this, and I will be too. The name did not pass through the air, where any listening thing might catch it. The account says the power went out of him and into her directly, from his body into her body, heart to heart. The true name of the sun-moving house after an eternity in one chest. And you will notice that I have not told you the name, and I want to be straight with you about why. It is not that I am protecting a secret for effect. It is that nobody knows. The scribes who wrote this story down 3,000 years ago did not write the name because they did not have it, because that was the whole point of it. The most famous secret in Egypt kept itself. It is one of the only perfect secrets in the history of the world, and it is still perfect tonight, and it rides on this boat with us, in a chest, not far from where you are standing, and it is no longer the chest it started in. Isis spoke the healing then, with the true name in it, and the poison obeyed the way everything obeys that name, and it left him, and the king stood up whole, and changed, because make no mistake about what had moved. She had promised the power to her son to come, to Horus, the next age of the world, and the god knew it, and heaven knew it. The bite did what nothing in the universe had done. It made the sun admit, in his own body, in front of everyone, that the story would go on past him, that there was a generation coming that would hold what he had held. Every parent in every century has faced some version of that morning, and I do not know one account, in any language, that pretends the admission comes free. The memory is gone. The shallows behind us have gone dark, and there is no more behind us, and no more memory ahead of us, because ahead of us there is no water to carry one. On the deck, the old god has lowered the hand from his chest, and near the stern, where she has been standing quietly this whole night, though I did not tell you until now, a goddess in a throne-shaped crown has stepped forward to the rail. Isis sails this boat. Friend, she has crewed it all along, the keeper of the name, standing guard over the king she once brought to his knees. And if you want to know whether he forgave her, look where he lets her stand. Family arithmetic is strange, and gods are worse, and the night is now too short for anything but the truth. The sun was setting, and no one knew whether it would return. The seventh gate is not opening ahead of us. It is already open. It has been standing open for us this whole time, like a mouth. The keel touches sand. Feel it. That long, soft, grinding shudder up through the deck. The single worst sound a boat can make. And then the silence after it, which is worse. We are aground, in the middle of the river of the night. The boat of the sun has run out of river. And if you look over the rail now, you will see what I could not have made you believe at sunset. The channel ahead of us is empty. Wet sand, still shining faintly. Stones that have never before tonight felt air. A riverbed lying naked to the dark. Because something up ahead has drunk the river. The Egyptians wrote its name with knives in it. I told you that in the first hour, and now you are close enough to understand it. When the scribes had to write this name, they drew the hieroglyph and then carved small blades into the sign itself, stabbing their own handwriting, wounding the word to keep the word from working. The only creature in their whole world so dangerous that even its written name needed to be fought. The name is Apep, and I have kept it from you all night. Not for suspense, but out of respect for the way they handled it. And the way they handled it was this. You do not say it until you must. Understand what is lying in the dark ahead of us. Because it is not a monster. And this is the hour where that difference becomes everything. Egypt had monsters, plenty of them, and monsters can be killed. Apep is older than that whole category. The texts reach for his size and give up. They say, miles of him. They say his coils fill the horizon. But size is not the point of him. He was never born. That is the point. He was not created in the first morning. He is what the first morning happened against, when the water opened its eyes at the beginning of this night. Remember, I told you the darkness became merely the background, and that it never forgave the light. This is that grudge. Friend, with a body. Apep is the old dark itself, the nothing that was everything, refusing to stay retired. He does not want the throne. He does not want worship, or territory, or revenge, as we understand revenge. He wants the sun to stop. Once, just once, because the whole shining machine you have watched built tonight, the sky, the fields, the names, the mornings, all of it runs on one wheel. And the wheel is this crossing. And if the boat stops, the wheel stops. And everything that has ever happened comes quietly undone, so he does not attack first. Mark this. His first weapon, the texts say, is the gaze. Somewhere ahead, in the black, 2 eyes have opened, and the stare of the serpent is a stillness that spreads. And that is why the river has gone silent, why the sounds dropped away one by one as we came down this reach. He is not hunting us. He is hypnotizing the night itself. The stare says only one thing, says it to the water, to the crew, to the tired old king, to you. Stop, rest, cease. You have crossed 10,000 nights, and you are so old, and it would be so easy, just once, to be still and hear, in the deepest silence this night owns. Listen to what answers him. A voice, one voice, low, from the bow. It is Heka, magic himself, and he is speaking the words that have been spoken at this exact bend of the dark every night since the duat was hung. The old binding spells, sentence after sentence, each one laid on the dark like a rope, and Sia stands beside him, seeing, actually seeing the serpent through the blackness, feeding every coil's position to the crew, because you cannot fight what you cannot find. And perception was put on this boat for one reason, and the reason is now. And from the stern comes a third power, and you know her. Isis has raised her arms, and she is spending it. Friend, the thing she took, the name from the god's own chest, the deepest power in the universe, thrown now against the enemy of the universe. And if you ever doubted why the sun forgave her, watch this hour. The theft armed the boat, the serpent moves. The sand hisses under a weight the ground was never built for. The coils come off the banks, and the head, the size of the dark itself, rises against the last dim glow of the gate behind us, and comes down toward the hull. And the spearman steps forward, the one from the prow, the one I showed you in the second hour and would not name, the one the whole crew gives room to. He plants his feet at the very point of the bow and hefts the long spear. And now, at last, because the fight is here and only the truth fights, I will tell you who has been guarding the sun all night. His name is Set, and if you know your Egypt, I will give you a moment, because I know exactly what that name just did. Set, the red god, the lord of the desert and the storm, the god of chaos, of violence, of everything crooked, the murderer. In another story, on another night, of his own brother, Osiris, the closest thing the Egyptian pantheon has to a villain. hated so thoroughly in later ages that his statues were recut into other gods. That Set, that is who stands at the point of the sun's own boat, in the sun's darkest hour, holding the only spear that matters. And the Egyptians, who put him there, knew precisely what they were saying. When the enemy is chaos itself, you do not send politeness to fight it. You do not send order. Order is what is being attacked. You send the one member of the family who speaks the enemy's language, the strong, violent, storm-hearted one, the one with chaos in his own blood. Because it takes a wild thing to stand eye to eye with the void and not go still. Egypt understood something we spend our whole lives relearning. Friend, some nights, your protection does not come from the best of you. It comes from the fiercest of you. Pointed the right way, the head strikes, and Set strikes back. The spear goes in. The texts say, through the eye, the great hypnotic eye, the stare that stops the world, put out at the point of a spear by the only god who never once blinked at it. And the night splits open with the sound the silence was hiding, and the coils convulse, and the crew is on the serpent with ropes, binding, the spells of Heka landing like chains, Isis burning the great name against the dark, and the knives come out, and I will tell it the way the tomb walls tell it. They cut him, bound, pierced, and cut, and out of the wounds of the serpent pours back everything he swallowed. The river returns. It comes boiling up the empty channel beneath us, lifting the hull off the sand, and the boat swings free, and the oars bite living water, and we are moving. We are through. The 7th hour is behind us, and the boat of the sun is still on schedule, but now the other half. And this is the half that makes the story true instead of merely thrilling. Look back. There is no body. There is never a body. The texts show him speared, bound, dismembered, burned, night after night, wall after wall. And every single dawn the scribes wrote the victory down, and not one of them ever once wrote the word dead, because they were honest men and they knew what they were looking at. You cannot kill the dark. It was here first. Cut it to pieces tonight, and it is whole tomorrow at sunset, waiting at the same bend, eyes opening, patient as its own nature, because being is an effort, and nothing is what remains. When the effort stops, chaos can be defeated. It can never be defeated forever. The Egyptians carved that lesson into the one sentence they repeated more than any other. The sentence, this whole night, has been ringing like a bell. The sun has died every single night since the beginning of the world, and every morning. So far, it has won. So far, you hear those two words differently now. I think, here is the anchor, and after this hour you have earned it. Everything you just lived through is painted on walls you can walk past. In the Valley of the Kings, in the tombs of the pharaohs, Seti I and Ramesses VI. The complete map of this night runs along the corridors, hour by hour, gate by gate, the boat, the crew, the ropes, and the serpent himself, enormous, pinned with knives, bound by gods, carved and colored 3,200 years ago, and still bright, because the desert dark preserved the paint the way it preserved everything. Tourists walk down those corridors every day of the week, descending as the pharaohs descended, deeper and deeper toward the burial chamber, and they are walking the actual route of this actual story, 1st hour to 12th, and most of them come out blinking into the Egyptian sun without ever realizing that the pictures on the walls were not decoration. They were a map, sealed in with the king so that his soul could navigate exactly the crossing you and I just survived. The old god has sat back down, slowly, And if you look at that ancient golden face now, you will find something on it that has not been there all night. And it is not triumph. Triumph is for people who think the war is over. It is closer to the look of a farmer at the end of a harvest day, tired in the deep tissue, quietly certain the field will need him again tomorrow, and at peace with that, because the field is his. Ahead of us, the river runs calm and black and deep, and the 8th gate stands open, and beyond it, for the first time since sunset, the darkness is not empty. Something vast and gentle is waiting down there in the stillest room of the night, and the boat is slowing, because even the sun approaches this next meeting. The way you enter the room of someone sleeping, the deepest hour is next. Friend, not the most dangerous, the most sacred, rest against the rail. We are going to meet the God of the dead. Every house has a room where you lower your voice. The night has one too, and we have reached it. Feel how the boat is moving now. After the 7th hour, after the ropes and the knives and the river boiling back into its bed, you would expect the crew to be loud with relief. And instead, the opposite has happened. The oars are barely touching the water. Hecker has gone silent. Set has grounded his spear and stands easy at the prow, head bowed, and even the hull itself seems to be choosing where it glides. The way footsteps choose themselves in a hallway at midnight when someone behind one of the doors is sleeping. Because someone is. That is exactly what this hour is. Somewhere ahead of us, in the stillest chamber of the whole world below, someone is sleeping, and the sun has an appointment with him, and it is the strangest and most beautiful appointment on the God's whole eternal calendar. Let me tell you who is down here. His name is Osiris, and he was a king once. Up in the light, in the ages after Ra rose to the high sky, Osiris ruled the earth in his place, and he ruled it so well that the memory of his reign became Egypt's word for the good old days. And he was murdered, betrayed and murdered by his own brother, and I will not tell that whole story tonight. It is its own night, one of the greatest stories humans have ever told, and it deserves better than a summary at the bottom of this one. What matters for our crossing is how it ended. His wife gathered him back from death, and I say his wife, and you already know her. Friend, she is standing at our stern this very moment. Isis, the keeper of the name, worked the greatest healing that has ever been worked, and the murdered king lived again, but not as the living live. He came back, changed, on the far side of the door, and heaven made him what he had earned, king of the dead, ruler of the quiet country, lord of everyone who has ever finished being alive, which is, if you stop and count, nearly everyone there has ever been. And here is what the Egyptians understood about their two great kings, the insight this whole hour is built on. The sun and the dead king are not rivals, and they are not strangers. They are two halves of one machine, and the machine is life itself, and neither half works alone. Think it through with me, slowly, the way this hour wants to be thought. Ra is life in motion, warmth, light, growth, the wheel of day, everything that moves, but motion spends itself. You have watched it happen all night. The crossing ages him. Every evening he arrives at the western door, worn down to gold leaf and silver bone. Motion, by itself, just runs down, and Osiris is life at rest, the seed in the ground, the root under the winter field, the power that waits in still things. Passion, packed, unspent, but rest, by itself, never wakes. A seed with no sun stays a seed forever. Stillness alone is just the dark with better manners. So the Egyptians, watching their grain die into the black soil every year and stand up green out of it every spring, drew the boldest conclusion in their whole theology. The two must meet every night. In the deepest hour, the moving one must come down to the still one. And for a moment, they must be one thing. And out of that meeting, and only out of it, comes morning. The boat has stopped. I did not see banks, and I did not see a mooring. But we have arrived, and ahead of us, filling the dark, the way a mountain fills a valley, there is a hall. Do not strain to see its walls. It does not have walls, in the way rooms have walls. It has presence, and in the heart of it, wrapped and still, crowned and sleeping, lies the great king of the quiet country, mummiform, arms crossed over his chest, holding the crook and the flail the way he has held them since his own story ended. Green, skinned in the old paintings, green as the first shoot out of black earth, because even his color is a promise, and the old god rises from his throne and steps down from the shrine and goes to him. What happens now? The texts describe in words that sound like they should not fit together, and I am going to give them to you almost exactly as the walls of the royal tombs give them, because 3,000 years have not found better ones. The sun enters the hall. The sun bends over the sleeping king, and the two gods embrace. And in the moment of the embrace, they are one being. The texts say it without blinking. Ra rests in Osiris. Osiris rests in Ra. One soul in two bodies, meeting in the one room where that is possible. The living power and the waiting power folded into each other like two hands clasping, and for the space of that clasp, and the Egyptians meant this literally, there is no difference between them. The oldest riddle in the world, solved once a night in the dark where no one can watch. Life and death are not enemies, friend. They are shift workers, and this is the handoff, and feel what is happening to the boat while they hold. The texts say this is the hour the renewal actually occurs. This meeting, not the battle. The battle only cleared the road. It is here, in the arms of the still one, that the old sun sets down his age. Here the spent day is composted into the coming one. The gold flesh drinks from the deep stillness the way roots drink, and somewhere in the folded dark of that embrace, the oldest heart in existence turns over, catches, and begins, faintly, to burn young, and the dead know it. Look at the banks, all along the edges of the hall, out into the dark beyond it. They are standing, the dead of every age, the whole population of the quiet country. And this, friend, is the hour they wait for. The Egyptians taught that the dead sleep through the long dark of eternity. But once every night, once, the sun himself passes through their country, and his light falls on them, and for that 1 hour they wake, eyes open, breath, or the memory of breath, moves. The texts say they rejoice. They say, the sleepers stand up in their wrappings and lift their faces, and for 60 minutes out of every 24 hours, the land of the dead is a land of the living. Lit, warm, awake, every soul in it, looking at the boat, and then the boat passes, and the light goes with it, and they lie back down into the dark to wait for tomorrow night. And the Egyptians did not find that sad, and I have come around to their way of seeing it. Everyone in that country gets exactly what the living get, a day. Theirs is just shorter, and they spend all of it looking at the light, which is more than most of the living manage. The embrace ends. The sun steps back from the sleeping king, and the sleeping king sleeps on, because his half of the work is done lying down, and the old god. And I am going to keep calling him old for 1 more hour. But watch him climb back aboard. Watch the step. There is something in the step that was not there since sunset. Comes back to the shrine and takes his seat. And the oars dip, and the hall folds itself back into the dark behind us. And along the fading banks the dead are lying back down. Easy, unhurried, like a stadium emptying after a win. The 9th gate, the 10th. The hours are moving differently now. Have you noticed? Faster and lighter. The way the last miles home always move. The water has a new sound against the hull. Higher, younger, whatever was given back in the deep room. The river feels it too. The 11th gate is ahead. And past it, the last one. And I have to prepare you for what happens there, because it is the strangest single image in this entire night. And if I spring it on you cold, you will think I invented it. I did not. It is on the tomb walls, at the end of the map, drawn with complete confidence. To be born again at the eastern horizon. The sun does not simply sail out of the underworld through a door. He goes through one more serpent, not the enemy. Not that. A different serpent. And the difference is the whole point. And the boat is beginning, very gently, to rise. Hold the rail. Friend, the last hour of the night is the hour of the impossible thing, and it is next. Every birth looks impossible from the inside. Ask anyone who has ever been born. The trouble is, none of us remember it. And so we spend our whole lives assuming that endings and beginnings are different doors. The Egyptians knew better, and in the 12th hour of the night, they drew what they knew, and it is waiting dead ahead of us right now. Spanning the river from bank to bank, it is a serpent, vast, still, and calm, and the river runs straight into its tail. Now, before your grip tightens on that rail, look at the crew. Set has not raised the spear. Heka is not speaking. Isis stands easy at the stern. And Sia, at the prow, is looking at the great shape ahead, with the expression of a pilot looking at his home harbor. Whatever this is, the boat has done it 10,000 times. And the boat is not afraid, because this serpent is not the enemy. Friend, I told you the difference would be the whole point. And here it is, as plain as the Egyptians could draw it. The enemy serpent lies across the road to stop you. This one lies along the road to carry you. The old texts give it a name that I want you to hear in full, because no one who ever lived at any other time or place would have dared to name it this. They called it World Encircler, and its body, this last mile of the dark, is not a wall. It is a passage. The final hour of the night is a tunnel, and the tunnel is alive. And the boat of the sun ends every crossing by sailing straight down its throat. Or rather, and here is the detail that made me love the Egyptians forever. The reverse. The tomb walls are exact about the geography. The boat enters at the tail, and it comes out at the mouth, backward, through the whole body, against the grain, and as the prow slides into the dark of the tail, feel what begins to happen, because this is the miracle the entire night was aimed at, and the Egyptians wrote it out in a single sentence, that I will give you the plain way first and the wondrous way after. Inside the serpent, time runs backward. That is the mechanism. That is the secret engine of the sunrise. Every hour of the crossing until now has aged him, the way every hour of every day ages everything. This last hour unages. The boat is sailing upstream through time itself, and the cargo is an old man. And with every length of hull we travel, the years are coming off him. Watch the shrine. I mean it. Do not look away. This only happens once a night. The stoop is leaving the shoulders. The gold flesh, hanging loose on silver bones all night long, is filling, smoothing, brightening, gold going from leaf to ingot. The bluestone hair is deepening like dusk in reverse. The hands that trembled on the rail through the middle hours have gone still and strong. And the face, friend, the face. You know how it is when you see an old photograph of someone you have only ever known as old. And for a second the young face and the old face swim together, and you understand, really understand, that they were always the same person. It is that, happening live, in the dark, at the speed of a boat. The evening god is sailing backward into the morning god. Autumn is pouring back through Ra, and somewhere ahead of us, at the serpent's mouth, at the very rim of the world, the beetle is waiting to receive what is left, which will be, by the time we arrive, hardly anything at all. A child, a spark, the sun at age 0. The Egyptians drew the arrival on the last wall of the map, in the last panel of the night, and it is one of the great images of the human imagination. The serpent's mouth opens at the eastern horizon, and out of it, pushed from behind by the whole recoiled night, comes the morning, and they drew the morning as the scarab, Capri, the beetle, the little roller from the bright hours of this story, huge now, wings spread, holding the newborn disk in its forelegs, lifting it up out of the mouth of the dark toward the rim of the sky, where the goddess Nut, the sky herself, the granddaughter, the cow who once carried a weary god away from the world, is waiting, arms down, to receive her father reborn and lift him into the morning. The texts even tell us what the last dark does at that moment. It closes behind him, the way water closes behind a swimmer. The night keeps nothing. The night was never able to keep anything. That was the whole wager. Every night, since the first night, and every morning, so far, the wager has paid. He goes in an old man. He comes out a child. The Egyptians looked at that sentence, the plainest description of what the sun does every 24 hours, and they refused, absolutely refused, to call it 2 events, death and birth. They insisted, our one door, seen from 2 rooms, and they built the biggest thing they ever built, the pyramid itself, the first mound in stone, as a machine for putting their kings through that exact door in that exact direction. And they painted this exact serpent in the corridors so the king would know the way, tail to mouth, old to young, west to east, out, now the anchor. And this hour has the best one of the whole night, because for this one you do not have to visit a museum case or take my word about a wall. For this one, the sun itself still keeps the appointment, twice a year, in public, and you can stand in the crowd, far up the Nile, at the southern edge of ancient Egypt. The pharaoh Ramesses II cut a temple into the living rock of a cliff, a mountain hollowed into a holy place, and he aimed it. I mean that as an engineering statement. The temple runs 200 feet straight back into the mountain, hole behind hole, growing darker with every step, until, at the very rear, in a chamber that no daylight should ever be able to touch, 4 statues sit side by side against the back wall. Ramesses himself, Amun, the hidden king of the gods, Ptah, a god of the deep dark, and Ra-Horakhti, Ra of the 2 horizons, the risen sun, and the whole mountain. Friend, the entire temple, is a calendar with one trick in it, twice a year, on 2 mornings in February and October, and tradition ties them to the king's birthday and his coronation. The rising sun clears the eastern cliffs at the precise angle the ancient architects computed, and a blade of light enters the temple door and runs down the entire 200 feet of darkness. hall through hall, and lands on the statues at the back, and lights the faces of the king and the sun gods, and it never touches Ptah, 3,200 years, twice a year, and the god of the dark sits in the one sliver of the back wall. The light was engineered to miss. That is not weathering, and that is not luck. That is the 7th hour and the 12th hour of this night. Stated in architecture, the light goes all the way into the mountain, into the dead dark, to the very back, and wakes what it came to wake. And the dark keeps its one seat, because the dark is part of the design, and the Egyptians never once pretended otherwise. The temple is called Abu Simbel, and it stands in southern Egypt this very night, and every February and October, in the cold hours before dawn. Thousands of people from every country on earth gather in the dark outside it. Tourists, pilgrims, families with sleepy kids on shoulders, and they wait, and the east goes pale, and the sun comes up over the cliffs, and the blade of light goes into the mountain on schedule, and the crowd, I have read the accounts, the crowd cheers. 3,000 years after the last priest of Ra went home, human beings still assemble in the dark to watch this god keep an appointment, and he keeps it. The mouth of the serpent is ahead of us now, and it is not dark. It is grey, then silver, then the first colour. That low burning line of rose gold you have seen 1,000 times from kitchen windows and highway rest stops and red-eye flights. The colour the east turns when the night has. Once again, lost, the boat is rising toward it. The crew is at stations for the arrival, and in the shrine there is no old man any more. There is a light I cannot describe with the shape of a child inside it, and the whole hull is humming like a struck bell. And above us, through the opening mouth of the last hour, I can see the underside of the sky, and the sky is reaching down. The sun was rising again. Friend, but you knew that. It is the one part of this story you have known your whole life. 2 gates remain, and they are not gates of the night. They are the gates of the morning, and of everything the morning built. And the first one opens on a world you know very well, yours. The mouth of the serpent opens, and the morning takes us, light everywhere, sudden and total, the way it is when you step out of a matinee into a summer afternoon, and the dark river is gone, and the gates are gone, and below the hull the world is spreading out green and gold, because we have come out of the night on the eastern rim of Egypt, and the boat has changed. Look down at the deck. We are riding the day boat now, the bright one, the Manjat, and the handoff happened somewhere in the light of that last gate the way it has happened every morning since the leaving, and at the center of the deck, crowned and burning, stands the child of the 12th hour, already grown into the king of the morning, and the whole country below us is waking up because he exists. But this is the 17th chapter. Friend, and you have been sailing with me long enough to know that we are not just going to watch one more sunrise. The night gave us his whole life. The morning is going to give us his afterlife, and it is going to carry us a very long way from the Nile. And it ends, of all places, in your country, because here is the last great question of this story. Egypt fell, the temples closed, the priesthood scattered, the offerings stopped, the language itself died on the tongue. Every kingdom that ever knelt to this god is dust and museum glass. So how is it that his story is being told to you tonight? In American English, 3,000 years later. What happened to the name? The name refused to set. Watch it travel. Start below us. In Egypt itself. In the centuries after the age we sailed through tonight, a new power rose in the south. The city of Thebes. And Thebes had its own great god, a mysterious one named Amun. whose name means the Hidden One, the god you cannot see. And when Thebes rose to rule Egypt, its priests faced the oldest political problem in religion: two supreme gods, one country, and they solved it the Egyptian way, the way you already know, from the three faces of the sun. They did not pick a winner. They merged. Amun, the Hidden One, and Ra, the Visible One, became Amun-Ra, the hidden power made visible, the king of all the gods. And under that combined name, the sun reached the height of everything. His temple at Thebes, the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, grew for 2,000 years. Pharaoh after pharaoh, adding courts and gates and forests of columns, until it became what it remains today, the largest religious complex ever raised by human hands, so vast that guidebooks measure it in cathedrals, and tourists tonight still walk into its great hall of 134 columns, each one thick as a sequoia, and stand there with their necks bent back, feeling exactly what the architects wanted them to feel, which is small and warm and glad about it. And once, just once, the whole arrangement nearly broke. And I owe you this part, because it is the strangest religious episode in Egyptian history, and the sun is at the center of it. Around the year 1350 before Christ, a pharaoh came to the throne who decided that all the gods, all the stories, all the crews and boats and serpents you have sailed with tonight were wrong. Only the disk was real. He said, the physical disk of the sun, which he called the Aten, that and nothing else. No Amun, no Osiris, no Isis, no night crossing. He changed his own name to Akhenaten, built a brand new capital in the empty desert, closed the old temples, and had the names of the other gods chiseled off the walls. It lasted one reign. When he died, Egypt went back to its whole rich story, the way a river goes back after a flood. His city was abandoned to the sand, and the old crews sailed on. I bring him up for one reason. Even the man who tried to erase every god in Egypt could not imagine erasing the sun. The furthest rebellion Egyptian religion ever produced was still, in the end, a man on his knees at dawn. Now watch the name leave home. The Greeks came, and they looked at the sun god's city and simply translated the sign over the door. Heliopolis, city of the sun, and their philosophers studied in its schools and carried its ideas back across the sea. The Romans came after, and did what Rome always did with things it admired, which is take them. Emperors pulled the obelisks of the sun, those stone sunbeams from the temple gates, out of Egypt by the dozen and shipped them to Italy as trophies, and they stand in the piazzas of Rome tonight. 13 of them, more than remain standing in Egypt itself. And a curious thing happened over the centuries that followed. The trophy became the template. The obelisk stopped, meaning conquered Egypt, and started meaning something older and simpler that every human eye reads without instruction. A shaft of light standing permanently upright. Aspiration in stone, and in that shape, the name of the sun set sail for the modern world. So come home with me now, friend. Come all the way forward to the United States of America, because the trail ends in 2 American places, and you have been to at least one of them. You already know the first. I made you a promise in the 4th hour of this night, over the white rooftops of Heliopolis, and I keep my promises on this boat. Of the 2 great obelisks that once stood before the sun, God's temple, the pair the world calls Cleopatra's Needles. One stands on the Thames in London, the other stands in Central Park, in New York City, on a small hill directly behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art. 69 feet of rose granite, 3,500 years old, quarried under Thutmose III, And it is not a copy, and it is not a fragment. It is the thing itself, a genuine piece of the City of the Sun, the oldest large object standing outdoors anywhere in North America. It crossed the Atlantic in 1880 in the hold of a steamship, and it took 32 days just to move it from the Hudson River through the streets and into the park. Rolled inch by inch on iron cannonballs, while all of New York came out to watch. Runners pass it every morning of the year, and every morning of the year, without fail. The first light coming up over the east side finds it and slides down it, top to bottom, exactly as the light of the same sun slid down the same stone at the gates of Heliopolis, while the priests sang the hymns of the morning boat. And the stone, I promise you, has not noticed any difference. And the second place, go south now, to Washington. Stand on the National Mall and look at the tallest structure in the capital of the United States. The monument raised to the founding father of the Republic. 555 feet of pale stone against the sky. Now, tell me its shape. It is an obelisk. The Washington Monument, the centerpiece of American national memory. The thing every schoolchild sketches and every visiting family photographs, is built in the signature shape of the temple gates of Heliopolis, a tapered shaft crowned with a small pyramid, and that small pyramid at the top, the capstone, is the Benben, friend, the first mound, the shape from the first morning of the universe, the hill the Creator stood on when he opened his eyes and made the light. The architects of the 1800s chose the form deliberately, in an age in love with Egypt, and I doubt one visitor in 10,000 knows the full depth of what is standing over the reflecting pool. At dawn, in Washington, the first sunlight in the whole city strikes the aluminum tip of that capstone before it touches anything else in the capital, the newest great nation on earth, saluting the morning, every morning, with the oldest religious image of the human race. Nobody planned that sentence. It is simply true, and it has been happening every clear morning since 1884, and it will happen again a few hours from now. The boat is high over the bright world, and the morning is fully made. And the name, you see now, never needed the temples. It rode out of Egypt in stone and in shapes, in the word Heliopolis and the pyramid on the dollar bill, in the cobra on the museum mask, and the needle in the park, and the monument on the mall, and it settled into the daily furniture of a country that never once worshipped it. And it waits there, patient as granite, for anyone who learns the story to suddenly see it everywhere. That is what happened to the name of Ra. Friend, it did what its owner does. It went everywhere the light goes. One gate left now, and for the last one, we are going to do something we have not done all night. We are going to leave the myth entirely and look at the actual star, the real one, the one that will come up over your actual town in a few hours, because the strangest discovery of this whole story is waiting there. The Egyptians, it turns out, were not wrong about the fight in the dark. They were early. Set down the myth for a minute. Set it down gently, right there next to you. We are not finished with it. And look up at the real thing with me, the real sun, the one that dried your driveway after the last rain, the one that faded the spine of every book on your windowsill, the one that is, at this exact moment, hanging over the far side of the planet, lighting somebody else's afternoon while you lie here in the dark it left behind. I want to spend our last gate on the actual star, because here at the end of the crossing, the science and the story are about to shake hands, and I have saved this for last because I find it the most wonderful thing in the whole night. Start with the numbers, because the numbers are a kind of scripture themselves. The sun has risen on this planet roughly 1.6 trillion times, 4.5 billion years of mornings, since before there was an eye anywhere on Earth to see one. And in all that unthinkable count, it has never once missed. Not one overcast eternity. Not one morning off. It is, by any measure a human being can apply, the most reliable thing that has ever existed, the deepest habit in nature, and every civilization that ever lived staked its calendar, its crops, and its children's lives on that reliability. And the bet has paid out every single day for the entire history of the world. The Egyptians simply took the streak seriously. That was their whole theological method. When you strip it down, they looked at a perfect record, 4 billion years long, and refused to call it automatic. Anything that faithful, they reasoned, must be fighting for it. And here, friend, is the part where I get to tell you that modern astrophysics, of all things, quietly agrees, because the sun is fighting. That is not a metaphor. It is the standard model of how stars work. Every star is a war between two forces, and the war never pauses. Gravity, the crush of the star's own colossal mass, pulls inward, trying every second of every day to collapse the whole thing into darkness. That is the first force. And if it ever won outright, the light would simply go out. What holds it off is fire. Fusion, the burning heart of the star pushing outward. And the push costs fuel. And the fuel is the sun's own body. Listen to the price tag, because I want you to hear it in plain American units. To keep the collapse at bay, the sun burns roughly 4 million tons of itself every second. Not per year, per second. In the time it took me to say this sentence, the sun spent 20 million tons of its own substance to stay lit. It has been paying that bill every second, without one missed payment, for 4.5 billion years. And it pays it so that a crush of darkness at its own core does not win. And if the Egyptians had been handed that finding, painted as a picture, I know exactly what they would have painted. A boat, a serpent, a nightly toll, paid by the light, out of the light's own body, forever. They did not have the physics. Friend, they had the plot. The sun really is in a fight it can never finish, against an opponent that can never be killed. And it really does win by spending itself. And the winning really is the reason you and everything you love exist, 3,000 years early, working with nothing but their eyes and their nerve. They got the story essentially right, and they got one more thing right. The hardest one. The one I will say quietly and only once, because it belongs to the deep future and not to your night's sleep. The Egyptians never believed the victory was guaranteed forever. So far, they said, every morning. And so far. And the astronomers, with their instruments, have arrived at the same clause. The fuel is vast, but it is not endless. Some 5 billion years from now, an almost inconceivable distance. More time than has passed since the Earth formed. The sun will finish its long spend, and swell, and redden, and set for the last time. I do not tell you that to trouble you. I tell you because it means the oldest prayer in Egypt was aimed exactly right. The morning was never automatic. It was never free. It is a gift with a ledger behind it. And the Egyptians were simply the first people honest enough to keep the books, now the final anchor of the night. And it is my favorite of them all, because it is not a stone, or a wall, or a monument. It is a watch being stood, right now, while you drift, high over your head tonight. About 22,000 miles up, there is a spacecraft called the Solar Dynamics Observatory. The United States launched it in 2010, and its entire job, its only job, is to watch the sun. It does not blink. It takes a new picture of the whole solar disk roughly once every second, around the clock. in wavelengths of light no human eye can see, watching the storms, the flares, the great burning arches bigger than worlds, and it radios every image down to analysts who monitor the stars' moods, the way meteorologists monitor a hurricane coast. And it is not alone up there. There is a whole quiet fleet, American, European, International, some parked between us and the sun to feel the solar wind coming. One of them, launched in 2018 and named the Parker Solar Probe, actually flying through the sun's outer atmosphere again and again. The fastest object our species has ever built, a machine we sent to touch the fire. Ask the scientists why, and they will give you the sober answers. Satellite safety, power grids, astronaut radiation, and every answer is true. But stand back and look at the shape of the thing. Friend, look at what our species is actually doing, and tell me you do not recognize it. We assembled a crew. We built the finest vessels we know how to build, and we sent them out into the dark between us and the sun, and we posted them there, en permanent station, to keep eyes on the light and warn us the moment anything in the dark moves against it. Humanity is standing at the prow. The watch has never actually ended. Do you see? It only ever changed hands. From priests on temple roofs marking the dawn, to astronomers with brass instruments, to a fleet of unblinking machines 22,000 miles over your bed. And the job description has not changed by one word in 5,000 years. Watch the sun, guard the crossing, make sure of the morning. The boat is slowing now. Both of them, I suppose. The one in the myth and the one in your chest. The last gate of this whole night is just ahead. Small and quiet and familiar. Because the last gate was always going to be your own bedroom door. And the story has one more thing to give you before it lets you sleep. And it is not a fact. And it is not an anchor. It is a morning. Yours. The one already on its way to you across the dark. Right now. On schedule. The way it has always come. One short chapter. Friend, let us bring the boat in. Come back to where we started. Friend, one last time. And gently. An American morning. Any morning. This coming one will do. Somewhere in Ohio. A porch light clicks off because the sky has taken over the job. In a kitchen, in Oregon. Coffee is going, and the window over the sink is doing that thing east windows do, filling up slow with thin gold. A dog is let out into a backyard in Georgia and stands a moment in the wet grass. Nose up, reading the new day. School buses are pulling out of depots. Sprinklers are ticking around their circles. A kid waits at the end of a driveway with a backpack too big for him, breath showing a little in the early air. And above the whole quiet continent, on time, without ceremony, the sun comes up, and here is the last thing I want to show you. And it is the whole reason the Egyptians told this story for 3,000 years. Look at all those people in the morning, the kid at the driveway, the woman with the coffee, the dog in the grass. Not one of them knows. Not one of them knows there was a battle last night. Nothing about the light on the kitchen window, says serpent. Says seventh hour. Says spear. The morning arrives, looking effortless, looking free, looking like nothing at all happened. And that, friend, that exactly, is what victory looks like. The Egyptians understood something profound about protection, and they built it into the very shape of this story. When the fight in the dark is won, the ones in the daylight never find out there was a fight. The whole point of the crossing was that the kid at the bus stop would never need to know it happened. Peace is not the absence of the battle. Peace is the battle. Won out of sight. Every single night. By someone who does not stop to be thanked. The boat is coming in now. Feel it under you, one last time. The night boat, our boat, the old, dark workhorse, is sliding toward her mooring at the eastern rim. Her crossing done, and out on the bright water her golden sister is already loading for the day run. The crews are passing each other at the waterline. Sia steps off with the quiet eyes of a pilot who found every channel. Hector goes with his words folded away until dark. Isis passes down the gangway with the name held safe in her chest. And last comes the spearman. Set, the fierce one, the one the daylight will spend all day calling a villain. And he ships his spear and says nothing, because night watchmen never do. They will all be back at dusk. They have never once not been back at dusk, and the passenger is already gone. Up ahead of the light, a child at the rim of the sky, climbing, so let the bells of this night ring one last time, all of them together, and then we will put them away. The sun was rising for the first time. That was the beginning, the hill and the opened eyes and the loneliness that wept us into being. The sun was setting, and no one knew whether it would return. That was the middle, the whispers and the lioness and the bite and the long grief of the leaving. The sun was rising again. That is now. Friend, that is always now. That is the only part of this story that is happening at this very moment. And it will be happening again over your own roof in just a few hours. And the oldest bell of all, the one we have carried through every gate. The sun has died every single night since the beginning of the world. And every morning, so far, it has won. So far, I promised you at the first gate that you would learn why those were the most important words in Egypt. And now you have the whole night behind you. So, hear them one last time, the way an Egyptian heard them. So far was never doubt. It was gratitude with its eyes open. It was a whole civilization refusing, for 3,000 years, to take one single morning for granted. Because a thing that has to be fought for every night is not a routine. Friend, it is a gift. That was always the whole prayer. Not make the sun rise. The sun needs no help from us. The prayer was simpler and humbler than that. Let us never forget what the morning costs. Sleep now. Really. This time, you have crossed the whole night. The first hill and the tears. The golden age and the whisper. The red beer and the sky cow. The name and the serpent and the deep still room. And you have earned the eastern gate. And if you wake in the small hours, the way we all sometimes do, and the room is dark, and the house is quiet, and the clock on the nightstand says 3 in the morning, do not lie there counting worries. You know what the clock is really telling you now. It is a map, somewhere in the dark. The boat is at the 8th hour, or the 9th, and the crew is at their stations, and the crossing is on schedule, and none of it needs you to stay awake for it. It never has. The boat sails whether you watch or not. Friend, it has crossed the dark every night since the first night of the world. It will cross it while you rest,